Good evening and welcome to the January 21st, 2025 meeting of the Spackenkill Union Free School District Board of Education. I'd ask that you rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance for me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, our first item is 2.01, comments from the public on consent agenda items only. Do we have any comments from the public?
I just had a quick comment regarding item 3.12, the donation. Great to see a donation like that. I just was unfamiliar with the Chestnut Market. Anybody familiar with it? It's not a question, really, just curious.
Gas station?
Yeah.
Is anyone
Right,
here?
but what's the connection to
Is there
Spackenkill? That's what I
a
wanted.
representative from
They-
Chestnut here? Because we're expecting someone.
The
Oh.
closest one is in Red Oaks Mill for us, but I also think one of the ones on Route 9 is
There's
also
one on Route
Chestnut.
9 by
They're a
the
Spackenkill
gas
family.
station.
Is it so family?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a connection. That's
It's
what I
a
wanted.
local
What was the
family,
connection
yeah.
to the district?
I believe
Yes.
part of their corporate, pledge is to give
Mhm.
back to the community, and we're within their community. And
Great.
I think they
Great
chose
to
us, which we're very grateful for.
Yeah, great to see.
That's how we choose fit. Do we know how that's going to be or where it's going to be allocated to or anything like that?
We do not. No.
Good problem to have.
Yeah.
Anybody else from the board? Okay, I entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as written. Motion by Sasha. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Richard. All in favor?
Right.
Aye, passes 5-0. Okay, that brings us to item 4.01. Do I have a motion to take from the table agenda item 5.01 from the January 7th, 2025 board meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's 5-0. And I believe we have some discussions here, 4.02.
Yeah. So the board received a pretty comprehensive packet on everything that we were talking about, trying to answer all questions and have clarity before the board vote today on the repair reserve fund. Some of the people who were instrumental in helping us compile this information are here today. Representatives from CPL, Clark Patterson Lee, our architecture firm, are here. Tim Moot, who's on the screen, or will be, and Chris Ladany are also here. So I know Tim is a little bit of a time crunch, so I would imagine we should lead off with him, and Chris, you could join in with that. So
Sure.
are there any questions from the board to Tim or Chris about CPL's analysis of, the concept of turfing our fields and the timelines and the cost? And, I think sometimes we've thrown cost out, and I think the board has questions over some of the numbers that I've gotten. So CPL is here because they can speak to the numbers, and I think their numbers have come back that are even higher than what we've discussed before. So I figured that would probably lead to questions of them, and also the timeline, and anything else, really anything else that was in the packet. So we can start with that.
Board? Questions?
Or we could have Tim start with an overview of what the analysis they gave.
That'd be
Tim, do you want to
appropriate.
start with that? Do you want to talk a little bit about the preliminary cost estimate you talked about? You gave an estimate on the baseball, turfing the baseball field, turfing the softball field, and costs. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure thing. Good evening, everyone. The superintendent indicated I'm Tim Moot. I handle the civil engineering side of CPL. Sorry I'm not there in person tonight. I'm double booked and really have a hard stop at 7:05. So I just wanted to be able to, facilitate what you need to move on through the meeting. I was asked at a very high level to come up with what I thought a potential budget to basically put synthetic turf on the infields of the middle school baseball field and the softball field behind Nassau. I understand it's a simple concept, and oftentimes it can be oversimplified. I'm not trying to basically be an alarmist here, but just make sure eyes wide open that we're making other considerations and not just focused on the turf. I asked one of our contractors, Clark Industries, not one of our contractors, but a contractor we've worked with. They're on the state co-op. They've done a myriad of athletic fields, both natural grass and synthetic turf. In sight unseen, I asked the representative there for a high-level construction estimate of what they thought it would take. I don't have an itemized quote, but basically I believe it was $500,000 for the softball, $700,000 for the baseball infield. From those numbers, I started to think of what I personally knew about the two sites. There's a lot more area to work with at the middle school in terms of drainage. The way the synthetic turf infield behaves and is built is with an infiltrating stone with collector pipes under drain underneath, basically funnels the water away from the play surface, and we need to basically manage that infiltrated water, typically through dry wells. But the big assumption is that the soils will allow dry wells to work. Oftentimes in our design, we have to install an overflow pipe in case the dry well gets inundated for whatever reason. The excess water needs to be able to get out of there without back charging and surcharging the infield. So typically we would have to reinstall a new backstop because of the level of work that's involved in earthwork to basically create a concrete curb around the footprint of the infield, and that's what the stone gets infilled on the inside, and then the synthetic turf gets affixed to that around the perimeter. Normally we've done baseball fields where it's turf on the infield and the outfield, so that construction method's similar, but in this case, if you're only doing the infield, there'll be a curb, buried curb, at the transition from the synthetic turf to the natural grass outfield. It's not ideal. I just caution that it can become a maintenance item because you're talking about two different types of materials, and it can also be somewhat of a trip hazard or a transition if you imagine running back over for a fly over their shoulder and run off the turf and onto the grass. Additionally, I just brought up, relative to Nassau, the field is at a very low spot. It's almost like in a bowl. The field is located at the bottom of the bowl. We have done some drainage improvements out there that did involve dry wells. I just caution that I think a little extra care should be done on our behalf to do a soils investigation to make sure the soils will perform, because immediately adjacent and behind the field are residences. So we didn't want to basically create a nuisance problem for the residents. Alternatively, it was like, we'll just do the infield, we can keep the dugouts. But we have a project going on in Western New York where that was the intent. And as we got through our soils investigation, found that the grades were not going to work in order for the drainage in the stone to behave as designed. So we needed to basically adjust the elevation of the field, which in turn required the dugouts to be raised. So that was a surprise. It's an added cost. It was already sort of midstream, and everybody thought it was just going to be a simple project. So basically, you know, my number that I gave was an inflated probably number based on the contractors. When we make a submission for this type of project, it has to go to state ed. We would include additional building work, which Chris Ladani there, the architect, can talk to what that would entail. But once we make a submission like this to SED, they're going to look at things that a lot of people don't really consider. One of them is emergency vehicle access, and the big one is ADA access. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to come back. 9 times out of 10, at least the ADA piece comes back. So there's other considerations from a global perspective. I know we're focused on just the turf in the infield, but point of my kind of broad brush estimate was to cover some of these unknowns. I think we put together a proposal that basically called for an initial study. In that study phase, we could do a topo survey of each field. We could do a soils investigation and better frame what we think the scope could be. And at that point, could certainly solicit whomever, as long as they're on state bid contract, and kind of get an apples to apples price quote. So that was my global intent.
Thank you, Tim. Questions for Tim?
Just one quick question from me regarding that. You said submission to state ed. A general idea about the timeline. I know we've had a project, you know, not too distant past here, so I think we're generally familiar with the timeline. But have there been any changes in that process in terms of the timeline, you know, that would lead you to expect, you know, significantly different amount of time to get this all approved?
Chris might be able to speak to that. I've heard things that it is improving, but I don't know if it's at 20 weeks now, Chris.
Is this on? Should this be on?
Just-
It's okay.
it's
All right,
okay.
I can project. So yeah, so basically the SED review times are at 16 weeks, but that's a little. It's a really we give, so if you did that, it's about 4 months, right?
Right.
But there's a comment response period after that. So once we submit, we're going to get an architectural review and an engineering review, and then the project manager up at SED does a fiscal review of it all. And each 3 of those entities are going to typically have comments. Sometimes they don't, but typically they do. And there's a comment response period. So that's where some of the time gets chewed up, is right there. So yes, they will come back and have some comments in that 16-week period, but you're not going to get that building permit, you know, at your 16 weeks. They did bring back the third-party review process, which will expedite the review. It would be like a firm like CPL would do it for SED and get paid for it. And that's the thing, you would have to, Spack & Kill would have to cut a check to any given third-party review entity. And you know, I'll be frank with you, it's not cheap. It's not cheap by any means, and it's typically based on the cost of construction. So they do like a percentage of that.
And that's a new requirement? You said they've added that back?
They
in,
added
you
that
mentioned.
back for an option,
I see.
just in case you get, if the schedule doesn't work out for you.
Okay.
You know, when third-party reviews were implemented in about 2018, there was some success, and then they started to go sideways a little bit. So they got rid of them, and now they're back with some new framework.
Oh, I see.
You know, so it's an option, but it's, you know, it's.
Do you recall if we had to go through that with the football field?
We did not do it for the football field, but we might, yes, we did do it. So we did it with Dr. Valente, that was the superintendent at that time. For phase 1 of that project, we did the roofing at the elementary schools, I believe, and that was done third party. The second phase, I believe, so all 3 phases were
Okay.
done. And at that point, we did the math of, you know, basically inflation and stuff like that. It makes sense to get this done this summer or
Right.
wait a summer, that type of thing. And, you know, as a group decision, you know, we decided to do the third party.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
In terms of process, what can be run concurrently to streamline these processes?
Well, yeah, so basically, so right now that we have, you know, one field at this building and then we have another field at Nassau, there's gonna be 2 project submissions. So, you know, the state, basically, anytime you do a project, you need to tie it to a building. So both designs can be, from our side, run concurrently. Really try to, the only other way that you could potentially shorten up the schedule a little bit, again, would be that third-party review. And then when you do get to the point of, you know, bidding for construction, like Tim had mentioned, you know, some of this type of work is on a state contract list. You know, Clark, for example, you could go direct with them. When you guys did your track and field at the high school, the carpet was done direct purchase, the scoreboard was done direct purchase. You could do some pieces of it direct purchase and bid out the rest, you know, depending on, you know, it's the district's prerogative at that point. So, but did I answer your question?
Yeah, partially. I
Yeah.
think, you just raised some interesting thoughts. The materials come from the state contract. The work comes from the bidding of a contractor.
You could do it that way. You don't have to,
Right.
but you can. Yeah.
But,
There's different
but
options.
Clark was gonna do all the site work as well, so their
Yeah.
number, that, I don't know the other quote, if that had all the site work labor in there or not, but Clark's did.
Yeah, Clark is one of the entities that could do everything, not only just supply the material, but also put it in.
I think the other question I had in terms of that concurrent process is, when do you submit to SED? At what point will you be able to submit to SED?
Yep, and Tim, if you could, you know, confirm this, but basically a design of this scale, you know, we marked out about 3 months to do it on our end, and then it would be, let's say we got the green light tonight, hypothetically, 3 months from now, well, based on, we have to do the survey and things like that, so some of this stuff is weather dependent, obviously, you know, there's snow on the ground, so, but in a vacuum, you know, 3 months would be good for us to turn this around.
Yeah, at least a month of that 3 months, we're waiting on either sub-consultants or the weather to basically get the field data, and then from there, hopefully it's a simple project, right? But
Right.
we also have to accommodate, like Chris, are you accommodating your building improvements?
Yes.
In that timeframe?
Yep, so, yeah, on the proposal it listed, and we took this from the BCS, which is the Building Condition Survey. Also, you know, which the Building Condition Survey turns into the 5-year plan. The 5-year plan is this, you know, living, breathing document with everything, you know, to get done with the district, as, you know, roofing down to flooring and everything in between. So, pulling from the BCS, you know, so basically taking a step back, to get building aid for doing site work, you have to do some building work, right? Like before I said, like every project has a building number to it. That's the way that SCD thinks, is just building, building, building. Every dollar and cents has to be tied to a building. So you want to try to keep the work somewhat simple in a sense, not to, you know, so I always recommend doing you know, an architectural piece like some flooring, some, you know, that wouldn't be asbestos, some ceiling replacements, or a simple one that came from your BCS is brick repointing. So basically a lot of the facades of your buildings are brick, and the mortar between the joints degrades, especially down below where you're throwing salt and things like that, especially on your chimneys when they're dealing with heat and, you know, hot, cold, that wreaks havoc. So we have on there to do some repointing, and about, you know, do about 10 to 15 grand of repointing, and that way you can get building aid for your site work.
We did recommend us doing a needs assessment to see if there's some inside work, and we talked about the auditorium and some heating stuff that we might want to
Right.
include if we're doing.
Sure.
a project.
Sure, yep, yeah, and in the background, speaking with the administration, Ms. Murphy and Mr. Fanuelli and Mr. Diamato, getting together and reviewing that 5-year plan, reviewing some of the stuff on the BCS. You know, if there's something that is more important to get done in the buildings than some brick repointing that has come up, well, by all means, if it's a pain point in the district, then we should address it, and maybe you can kind of capitalize on a submission that way too. But it's up to you guys. It's up to everybody. You know, But, you know, I'm here to help and Tim's here to help, but the decision, you know, is gonna come from the group.
So you said the repointing of the brick would be about $10,000 to $15,000, and that would qualify us to get the building aid on that?
That's correct. So the state's requirement is that you have to spend at least $10,000 on the building itself.
And if, I apologize because I really actually can't hear anything right now.
Yeah.
I'm completely deaf. But did you say it'd be, if you got a green light on it tonight, it'd be 3 months?
Yeah,
for you to-
3 months of the design process. So 3 months of our engineers going through it all. I would be handling the SED workbook, which is basically a stack of, you know,
And that's
forms.
part of that 3 months is the
Yes,
SED
that's
workbook?
part, yep, that would be part of it. That's, you know, Ms. Murphy's, you know, familiar with all those forms and, you know, the financial forms and all these different, you know, pieces of the puzzle you gotta submit per project. So that would be part of that 3-month period.
Take them through the timetable though, 'cause I don't want confusion.
Yeah, so basically, it would be.
You talked about a year or something, we'll take them to each stage, I think it's in your letter,
Yep.
that is in your packet, but like,
So basically, yeah, just to go through it all, so let's say design is 3 months, right? You know, weather dependent, so let's add a month on there just in case, right? 3 to 4 months. And then, you know, the SED timeline, I'm gonna say it's 6 months. You know, it says 4 months on the website, but that's a little deceiving. 6 months from submission to building permit is 6 months.
Mhm.
And then your bidding period's typically a month. And that way you package everything up, put it on the street, have, you know, contractors come and bid on it. And then you're ready to go.
So this isn't something that would be done for this season, but is there any reason that it wouldn't be by the following 2026 season? That's well.
No,
over
that would be a good timeline, would be not this summer, the following, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yep.
clarity.
Yeah, Clark indicated roughly a month and a half per field for the work,
Yeah, the 3 months, et cetera.
once it's in construction.
Right, yeah, I forgot to
Would that
mention
be
what it would take to.
consecutive or at the same time?
I don't know, Tim, would they be
We
doing
didn't
them?
get that far, but they're big enough that they could do both.
Yeah,
Chris, just want clarification?
Sure.
Because you just said something to the board that you thought next season, when we spoke, you thought they'd play 2 more seasons at minimum from what we
so,
talked about.
let's say if we're saying a year for.
After voter approval.
After voter approval, so that's where, once the voter approval does happen, so that, I mean, so I'm saying, not this summer, next summer, if it happened tonight, so I'm sorry to be confusing, but if, once we get that green light, for argument's sake, give it a year until shovel hits the ground.
Optimistically, it could be this fall, though.
Optimistically, if you did some of the third-party review and that was successful, there's a couple unknowns there, but, you know, you could shorten that SED review time down. You could with this third-party review, but it's gonna cost you. Yeah, it's possible, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number we are provided with is quite inflated, which is fair, because I'm in the field, I understand, you normally want to try to give a bit of a high estimate
Sure.
so that your pants aren't caught down. So
Sure.
I completely understand it. I have, you know, a number of contacts in my field. I have some ideas in my mind where it would come in.
Yeah,
You know, I think, you know, just knowing some of the soils, I guess, I know that middle school area is probably gonna be more silty and a little more challenging on the drainage. I think over at Nassau is actually a little more sandy loam over there. It's pretty deep, but, I know some of that field was already cut out too, so I don't know how much has been cut out in the past to know how deep it goes, so. I think there's a lot of, potential to see if we can move this faster, and I think it might come in a little bit less than what you're saying, which is, you know, something that we can also work with you on value engineering as well, I suppose. But I wanted to go back to one thing Tim had said there.
you know, this is becoming a much more frequent improvement to baseball fields throughout the area. So frankly, I think that they've got the curb to grass transition down pretty good. And I really don't think it's really a safety issue. I think it's really, you know, obviously you gotta keep watching it, but that's our responsibility, is to keep watching it. And, you know, periodic maintenance on the turf fields is always gonna require, they're gonna be checking for safety as well, so.
Right, I don't want to make it sound like right out of the bat it's a safety issue. Like you say, if it's not maintained and it's not kept an eye on, it could become a safety issue. The other thing to consider, and again, I'm not trying to talk you out of this, but if at someday you decided, hey, I want to turf the whole field, that curb is going to be in there and would have to come out. It's from my understanding, but you could cross that bridge down the road.
Tim and Chris, why don't you talk about this? Dana just said the popularity of this is, what are you seeing in districts? Are a lot of turf fields coming up? Like, what do we have in our area?
So,
So we did Spack and Kill back in 2006.
They're talking about baseball field.
Baseball infield, right? We had done all the turf fields at Arlington, and you know the infield was one of the last things to get. I think there was a donation for that. We're doing a ton of these multi-purpose fields where, you know, it's taking a soccer field and inlaying this diamond, so you have now converted to cross-breeding sports, if you will. That seems to be the flavor of the day. And then in that case, you would have all turf outfield. So I think it's a modest improvement on what you can do. And you know, I don't know that at the end of the day, you'd want to consider turfing everything in Nassau, but maybe more so at the middle school. But money is a factor. We understand that, and we want to work with you and get this to be the best project for everyone. So, you know, I don't want to overinflate this to like kill the project. That's not my intent. My intent is like you said, eyes wide open, and we'll do everything we can to zero in on the critical scope here, which could be a cost reduction.
What do you think? What could the cost be? I mean, Mr. Kohler said some stuff of his knowledge. Like, what do you think? So we have eyes wide open.
Well, like I said, I mean, all the drainage disappears at Nassau, and there's residences right behind there. So I wouldn't want to have a concentrated scenario that changes the way things are. I don't have a full understanding of where it all goes. I mean, that would be part of our study. You know, and then as far as ADA, we'd have to look at grades and whatnot and come up with a bigger scenario. There would be site work to make a walkway or a pathway. I don't know parking wise where that falls relative to this. And then it's emergency access to get back there if there was an injury. So I can't tell you any real hard and fast numbers. I mean, the first thing to do would be what we're recommending is a little bit of a study.
So you threw out 2.2 million, but we're obviously thinking it's going to be less than that.
So I had 500,000 and 700,000 from the contractor. That's all parts, materials, and labor. And then I threw in a buffer on top of that for additional site work if drainage doesn't work and we have to do something above and beyond dry wells. And then it's the site access. So I don't know, maybe it's half of that. I don't know.
Okay. A little bit over $1 million. All right.
yeah, I mean, Tim does bring up a good point. You know, SED is going to make you want to make this ADA accessible. So that's going to be cost there.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit? Is it ADA access all the way down to, say, the dugouts, or is it ADA access for the patrons watching?
It would be both, really.
All of the above, yeah.
I don't think that's something that we'd want anyways, to be ADA compliant,
Exactly.
regardless if we have it
So,
or not.
yeah, it's something that we would be proactive with and put it in the design. Sure.
Can I have a question for maybe Val or Paul here? The money on our consultants, is that also aidable?
money to get
So the
the,
To
consultant-
pay our consultants?
to pay them to
Before
do-
the project's anything that's done really before the project starts is not able to come out of the general fund budget.
What is that point of start?
When we get voter approval.
Voter approval is a start.
Because there is a possibility of starting, like, you could technically order kind of to check the soils and do that. I think it was like a $50,000 piece. But we would have to find that in our budget, which we couldn't do this year, but we would have to budget for that, but then we wouldn't get aid on that. We'd have to pay for that fully. But if after that stage, it was deemed, hey, this project is doable, that stage would count towards the timeline. If he had said the 3 to 4 months,
Right.
that would count, that would take some of that away. So then, once you got voter approval, that piece could have been completed. Except that we would be on the hook for the full lot of that. It would have to come from,
$50,000.
it would have to come from the budget, not from a fund.
So, just to clarify, you're talking about a scenario in which we'd start the study, do the study prior to voter approval, and then have voter approval, and then go forward. Of course, if the voters don't approve it, that's money that goes to waste, right?
Yes.
Well, you would have your site surveys and you would have your geotech information. So you would have data.
Right.
It wouldn't be all for nothing. I'm trying to be positive.
If you
but,
were
know,
to, if
like-
you were to approve it at some later
Right,
point, you'd have
right.
that done already.
Exactly,
Yes, okay.
exactly.
Would that be time and materials? Because I frankly, I think you can do better than 50,000 for it.
Well, basically, so that 50K would be, so task one of our SED submission, we have labeled as roughly 25K, right? So that's the schematic design, basically, data gathering, things like that. Tim and I agree
If you want to look at
that,
their letter, it's in their letter.
yeah, Tim and I agree that a good thing would be the doing the geotech and the site survey, which would be consultants, that would be sub-consultants of us that would need to get, so that would be roughly 25K. And that to me, again, getting that data would be great, and then if you guys wanted us to, keep moving on the study once we get that data, then yeah, we're, like Tim said, we want this to be a successful project, so whatever you need us to do and whatever, schedule, we'll be happy to accommodate within reason. So that 50K number is basically for a full-blown schematic design after the data is all gathered. I'm sure once the data is gathered, we could all get it together and have it, since you're in the industry and you and Tim could look at that stuff and go nuts, you could definitely, get a lot more clarity on what the true scope of work is out there.
So you're saying this $50,000 investment would be closer to a $25,000 initial?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
if we decide to move forward?
Yep. And that
And
25.
any of the sub-consultants would be a direct pass-through to you guys. I mean, we have to pay prevailing wage, or you have to, for this type of work. So both the drillers and the surveyors, so whatever their quotes are, would just be a direct pass, so you would see those numbers. We're not marking them up.
Right.
Is there any reason that we don't have $25,000 in this budget this year to be able to do that?
We could, but that would mean that there would be other things that we would not do with this budget.
So we do have the funds to be able to do it, but it just might mean less
They're
going
not
into.
extra funds, there are, if we were to decide to do this, then other things would have to.
They're earmarked for other things that we
Right.
have to un-earmark. However, July 1st starts a new budget season, where things wouldn't be earmarked.
So at the end of each year, we have surplus that goes into our reserve funds?
And that's surplus based on the revenues. What the voters vote on are the expenditures, and that's the solid budget. Any money that we have left over is because we got extra state aid, or we got extra money
Mhm.
along the way. So that's where the extra comes from. It's not left over unexpended.
So is any of that can any of
Thank you,
that be
Tim.
used towards those earmarks?
It could, but I wouldn't know what that number is at this point. We're not far enough in the year.
Okay.
Where did the 50 come from? Because that's phase
That was-
one.
that
and
was
it's task one. and
Task one
two.
plus the geotech and the site survey. So you take your sub-consultants, right, 25K, and then CPL to get us through schematic design would be 25K. I'm saying that you do the data portion of it first, hold off on the schematic design until it's a real again, the reason why they're not doing building aid on something prior to, because they don't have a building number to tie it to. That's that whole thing again, the SCD number, right? You always hear that, at least, in my industry, we hear it all the time. Every single dollar and cents has to be tied to some sort of,
And you think that this data collection would take about 3 months to, given the weather?
I would have to lean on on Tim to coordinate that with our consultants. I know geotech engineering and core drilling is a somewhat unique thing. I know a couple companies that do it, and last time I talked to them, which was probably about a year ago, they're pretty busy these days. So hopefully you would able to get a drill rig out here sooner than later, but that's somebody else's schedule, unfortunately. But we work with these people all the time, so they're usually pretty good with us. So
You had discussed with me that you didn't think if we were able to do this, authorize it in July, it wouldn't affect, we wouldn't miss, because we were under the impression we would take at least 2 baseball seasons.
Sure.
So waiting until July wouldn't change that.
if you waited till July, then it would truly be those 2 seasons like we talked. Yep. Yeah. I had a little
The chips
confusion.
fall right.
Yeah, I had a little confusion saying starting now, but
Yeah.
that's not realistic, so forgive me.
So it sounds like whether we're doing this, hoping that the chips fall right, I guess, for that terminology. Whether we're moving forward with this now or 3 to 5 years from now, this data collection will be able to be used then.
Yep.
I think it'd be beneficial to us to know if this is even something that we can consider in getting this done sooner rather than later. Because if it's something that's just not feasible, then let's stop putting our efforts towards it.
Sure, sure,
So
yep.
I would like to see this authorized to move forward on spending the $25,000 to do this data collection.
Right. And we can get you, real hard numbers on those quotes, basically. We would engage those consultants and they would provide us with a proposal.
How long do you think that would take to?
That could be quick. That could be quick.
We could probably hone in on the drainage aspect right after that work is done then.
Yep.
And to me, that's where we get to the real nuts and bolts of this whole thing,
Exactly.
based on the drainage that we're gonna have to do underneath, so.
100%.
That's what Tim talked about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, that could be 100K, 200, I mean, that could really be, depending on how much subbase, and, I'm no civil engineer, but I understand that, truckloads and truckloads of stone, and, it gets expensive very fast, so it's basically the stone sandwich that you put under the field so everything can kind of drain, and so, yeah, it's not cheap, but.
Anything we didn't cover for CPL? Is Mr. Lanzoni here?
He is here.
Is he
I
standing
saw
in the
him.
back?
There he is.
I didn't hear any questions to it, but Marco did talk about the concept of one field. I think a lot of that was in here. I don't know if you wanted to talk to that a little bit. and
Yeah, sure.
Anything else?
Yep. So I did look at the feasibility of sharing both the baseball and softball fields. In my opinion, talking to the softball and baseball coaches, I think that would be not practical for 3 reasons. So one, there's not enough practice time on our fields. We have 1 baseball field, 1 softball team, 6 teams, so it's difficult finding practice times on the fields we have. Varsity JV practice on our Todd and Nassau fields. We send our modified teams to the town of Poughkeepsie Parks for practice. They can't play games there. Usually the town takes over the field at 5 o'clock, but they do allow us to practice for our modified teams. Two, the baseball teams all play their games on the Todd Field. The game schedule's packed. So if you look at it right now, we still have to add 3 or 4 more varsity non-league games. But once preseason ends, we have 3 to 4 baseball games on that field per week. There's one week we have 5 games. If spring break, it's light because a lot of schools don't schedule games. But it's 3 to 5 games on that field, baseball games. So if you're going to try to squeeze softball games in there, that would be a challenge. And if you took the rest of the open dates, baseball would have no practice time on the field. And the last challenge is the league schedule. So the league schedules varsity baseball, varsity baseball, softball, JV baseball and softball, and modified baseball together. So they send their teams to us on the same date. And they do that because most teams don't have 2 baseball fields or 2 softball fields. That's why they send softball and baseball together. And it's a big savings for the districts on combining those teams. It's about $450 per trip when you send an athletic team to a school. So combining them saves money. And then the last thing is it's really not feasible for schools to split them up. So if we asked Highland to bring their softball on Monday and baseball on Tuesday, districts are having more and more difficult time getting buses. Some schools are limited with only 2 or 3 trips per day. So we couldn't make them split all those teams up because a lot of schools wouldn't be able to get a bus to send the other team on a separate day. The other thing I want to add, so you were talking about how common it is. Tim said it's getting more and more common. Just so the board's aware, in our county, Dutchess County, I believe Arlington's the only team that has turf on baseball and softball. In our league, the 18 schools within Mid-Hudson Athletic League, there's nobody that has turf fields. In our section, which is comprised of 46 teams, Monroe, Woodbury, and Middletown are the 2 schools that have it, just for context. Any questions?
Weren't you involved in the dirt proposal? You and
Yeah.
Anthony walked the field or something?
So, and I wanted to start out with just thanking the board, thanking Dr. Fanuelli for the conversations about upgrading our athletic fields. This is 2 or 3 meetings here that we're talking about improving our facilities and our athletic facilities. So I really appreciate, Dr. Fanuelli putting a proposal together, the board with all these conversations. I take great pride in our athletic facilities. You'll often see me out there prepping the softball and baseball field for games. I'm out there scuffing marks on our brand new high school basketball court. I'm on the turf, every day in the fall. So I appreciate all this conversation of trying to, give our kids the best. So thank you for that. So my role in this process, back in June, our head baseball coach, Don Neese, and I met with Anthony on the baseball field. And we met because we wanted to talk about the concerns of how particularly the infield was playing. So over time, our infield has become uneven, some high spots and some low spots. The lips where the clay meets the grass has become a little bit of a mound. And over years, that happens. The clay pushes over into the grass. So we met with Anthony to kind of go over some of the improvements that we thought could make the field safe and something that the kids could be proud of. So in that proposal, that list of repairs came from that meeting. Coaches and I really want that field repaired as soon as possible. So I like the conversation about turf and all, future, but really, and I met with the coaches again, and I think the comments from baseball parents in the last meeting tells you that, the field has progressively gotten worse. It's time for repairs. We're hoping that these repairs get done as soon as possible. When we met with Anthony in June, we were hoping that they were going to get done in June, in the summer. understandably, the quotes that came back, Val said, you know, the district budget can't cover the cost. We have to put it through a repair fund. We have to do a proposal to the board to get it done. You know, we wish it got done. We're hoping that some work gets done in March to make the field safer, and the kids could be proud of it. And then we hope the rest of the work gets done after the season. Because like some of the parents said, you know, at times it can be dangerous, but if the field is done correctly and those repairs are made, it's going to be a field that it's beautiful, that plays well, and something that we can be proud of.
Any questions for Martha?
I don't have a question, but, I'm sorry, Robert, or, Richard,
Go ahead,
you want to
go
go
ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. I guess I do have one question. If you had your choice between a turf field or a dirt field for our baseball field, which would you prefer?
So we've talked about it.
I know we have.
Yeah, turf is beautiful. I don't have a lot of familiarity with it. We don't play any teams that have turf fields, so I'm not familiar with it. Our turf field at the high school has been great, you know, plays even, and our baseball, and this is something the board might know, our baseball and softball teams use the turf in March. So when our field is if there's snow and ice on it, they've been practicing, they split the field, and our baseball and softball team are using it. So that's been very beneficial, having that turf field at the high school. I want a safe field. I want a field that we can be proud of. So if this is something that's going to be down the road, I'm really hoping that the board will start repairing the field immediately. And then if you want to pursue turf down the road, that's one thing. And I'm fearful from my experience here. I'll be honest with you. I've been here long enough to see the district put up a capital project where we separated the inside work of what needs to be done and the district needs and the turf field. And the turf field was rejected. So my fear is that we don't do any work on the field to repair it now, and then down the road, you know, there's not community support for softball and baseball, and we're back to square one. All right. So the softball, football field, track was a community project. You know, it was a lot of community used that. A lot of our soccer, football team, you know, multi-purpose field. So we just got to make sure that we can get the community support for our baseball and softball fields, because it's a little bit less of a community field. It's more of a program field.
I agree with you. I'm also concerned about the community support of it. You know, we have baseball compared to a football field, a soccer field. We redo the basketball courts. We do redo the stands in there. And baseball and softball are often the forgotten sport for whatever reason. I'm sure there's definitely other ones as well, and not just athletic programs, but other ones that are also don't get as much attention or community support that maybe could.
Yeah.
But I do think that we do need to get work done on the field this year, regardless of how we choose to move forward at this point. That would be a stop right there for me if we weren't able to move forward with some kind of work on the field this year. We do work on the field every year, right? We come in, we put something down every year on it, we work on it every year?
Yes.
That's what was, yeah.
There's
So-
a fall, spring, and an in-season plan.
Right, so regardless, we'll be bringing in something and working on the field this year, because that's what we've done every year before, so we'll still get work done. It doesn't sound like this year that the grass or the infield would be able to, or the mound or anything like that would be able to be fixed this season anyways. But just a possibility that we might be able to bring in clay if the season is right. No guarantees of that, just a possibility that we might be able to get the clay in here and the 4 inches dug out and a little bit of drainage done on it. But that's no guarantee on this year. with it. But that, no matter what, we would still be able to bring in some, some top sand and redo the field like we've done each year to repair it. So it sounds like no matter what this season, it will get some maintenance done to it. We don't know if we're going to be able to do the clay, and we definitely know we're not going to be able to do the seeding. We just did the same thing at Red Oaks Mill. It was shut down for an entire season. We couldn't step foot on that field for an entire season right after they redid it. So if we did it, we're not going to use that field for an entire season. So it's probably something that's going to have to wait until after this season regardless, possibly until the summer, other than us bringing in some sand and doing some top dressing on it.
Anthony, you want to speak to that? 'Cause I thought we were hopeful that we could get the.
Sure, yeah.
There's a, in the packet, there's a repair work timeline. It is under the past and future maintenance estimates. It's at the bottom of that one page. It's like the one you have in your hand, Dan.
Well, this is the resolution that we're
Nope.
entertaining, right? Is that what you're talking about?
He included a repair work timeline.
Oh, that's, yeah, the table.
Yeah, because we had said, I had said to Anthony, look, if we somehow we were gonna do the dirt, we have to get something done, and he was, I think, a little pessimistic, but then you spoke to the contractor and you put together this thing, and is that still true today?
Yes, so I did review with the contractor what he felt he would be able to get done for the baseball season and what would have to get done after the baseball season. It does sound like he'll be able to come in, cut that lip out, do all the shape up, bring in all of the new clay, put it down, redo the pitcher's mound, the batter boxes. That'll all be able to get done for the beginning of the season according to the contractor. The part that won't work, obviously, is we can't top dress the infield, we can't plant grass, put seed down, because obviously it won't grow before the baseball season. So that portion of it will have to be likely done. The best time for that is in September, late September, so it won't be too hot and the seed will grow. But we will be able to get a good portion of the work done and some of that new clay brought in. A bit more can be done than our typical maintenance for the beginning of the spring.
How much are you estimating phase 1 to be?
I haven't split up the cost, but if I'm a rough estimate, might be about 2/3 of that cost that we have listed under the repair reserve for it. I'd have to give you, I'd have to actually do the work and split that up.
But that phase 1 was the bulk of it.
It was. It's everything aside from topsoil and seeding the
Grass
infield.
work, yeah, because you can't grow grass in that dry period.
That's the baseball field. The softball field can be done completely.
Correct. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We had asked for a copy of the estimate for what this was going to be,
What?
of what, the
The
repair reserve
96,000.
option was gonna be. I don't think I've seen it.
That was that in the
The
packet?
94,
Revised repair
370.
reserve project list of 94,000, just
So-
asking for the estimate on that.
No, I think we thought you had asked for the baseball, softball cost estimates for turf. So what you're asking for now is like an itemized list of what the $94,000 is going for.
That's what I had asked for prior to the previous meetings, simply asking for that.
Okay.
And that's
We'll
fine.
work to get it for
I
you.
would still like to see
Is that
that.
something you have, Anthony, or is that something you have to create?
No, we have it. Yep.
Anthony, is the baseball field crowned properly right now so that if you put this clay, that it's gonna drain off properly? Or are we gonna be double handling this material and then ruining some of the material we're bringing in to regrade it properly to establish the right crown?
Yes, we're removing material. That's part of this project. We're removing the old material, creating the appropriate crown, and while laying the new clay in. Yes.
So you're gonna be able to, the grass doesn't change. That's, to me, there's an issue there.
Sure.
If the grass on the infield, that's your set elevations, you have pinch points now. So I just don't want to get into a point where we end up spending some money while we're also considering a turf option, but then that money isn't well spent. So I'm just trying to get my arms
Sure.
around this whole
Sure.
concept, because I feel like the tying in of the final clay elevations around the grass, whether it's the grass on the foul side, the outfield side, or the grass on the infield, you're really stuck to the same elevations, unless you're gonna rip up the grass and redo the grass. So I'm just not sure if phase one is really feasible for the baseball field.
Understood. I can review with the contractor and see what his thoughts are and get that information. See if he has a way of doing it or that he's done. in the
I think
past.
more importantly is if they break it up into the two phases,
Mhm.
does it escalate the 94, 370?
Understood. Information I'd have to get.
Yeah.
Although if I could clarify, what you've got in the project list there is top dress grade and seed the infield. Dan's referring to the sidelines, foul areas in the outfield, but there would be no plan necessarily to seed, top dress and so forth, those other parts, just the infield, right?
That's true, yes.
I'm no engineer, but I would imagine that's a little easier to manage in terms of the elevation. I mean,
Chris,
Well, it depends how you
any knowledge of
establish
that,
the
Chris?
crown.
It's okay if you don't.
Not really.
All right.
Yeah, it's about establishing the crown to make sure it drains off properly. So sometimes that means that you push the work past other areas as a result of that. to
Where
create
the
pot.
turf will meet the grass, right?
Where the
Yeah.
clay will meet the.
Yeah, yeah.
The
the
infield
surface,
meets
yeah.
the infield grass meets
Yeah.
the infield
Yeah,
skin.
because he says he could take that down, so would they be, because when we talked about it, they talked about taking that lip that you had discussed that is there, that they'd be able to take that down in phase one. Then he raises a good point, does that, without growing new grass, are they able to, I mean, he seemed to think it was safe, but his question is pretty interesting. You know,
Yeah,
does it?
agreed. Yeah, I'll follow up and get some information and see what his thoughts are on that and get back to you on it.
It also says for phase one, phase two, right below that, that this is all weather dependent. Is there any possibility that phase one couldn't happen because of weather?
I think there's always a possibility. It's always a possibility. You know, who knows if we have a snowstorm in mid-March, right? But the idea is that, given the past few winters, that we should be able to get that work done.
Regardless if we go with phase one or just bring in, you know, the sand like we usually do each year and redoing the field that way, we could do some kind of work to the field this year, whether we approve phase one, phase two, or we just do another year of regular maintenance that we've been doing for the past couple of years as we consider whether or not turf's going to be an option.
Yes.
Thank you.
I had a question earlier for Mr. Lanzoni, and it relates actually to you, Anthony, as well.
Sure.
But in part, I think you've answered it. I mean, I wanted to say, first of all, I really appreciated the context that you just laid out in terms of the earliest discussions about improving the field. I think, my sentiments are, I think, very much the same as yours. My children have played sports here as well, played baseball for a long time, and I feel that field's in need of repair, has been for a while, has been at the last meeting. So I appreciate your forward, kind of looking attention to this back starting last June. And that's how I understood what had been proposed here as coming together of those discussions earlier. And Anthony, I appreciated your efforts here in this respect from even before you were hired. I mentioned that before. This was something you saw and targeted, from early on. So I appreciate that information and the timeline. The question I had actually, I think, was more or less answered, whether it would be feasible to have the phase one work done for this coming season, right? And I understand it's weather dependent, but it sounds like it's possible. When do we start playing games, Mark? I guess that's a
First week of April.
First week of April. So you know.
Yeah, so, I don't know the exact date, but
Yeah.
we're still working on our non-league schedule. So the season starts March 18th. We'll have some scrimmages and some non-leagues possibly, the first week of April that aren't currently listed on the schedule, but we're working on finalizing that schedule.
Okay, good.
So it's a couple weeks of practice, and then we, weather dependent, we cross our fingers and hope to start some contests.
All right. Okay, appreciate that. I mean, my feeling is, in response to that information, much of what you said, much like what you had said, Marco. I mean, I saw this as a real opportunity to improve our fields in the immediate term that would, carry over for next several years. To me, it seemed from the very beginning that was the prudent way to go about this. And I remain a bit confused about, about the whole history of the turf field idea. I guess pun intended. It feels to me that whole idea came out of left field recently. I know it was broached as a question in October, late October, early November. And while I appreciate the discussion, as you mentioned earlier, Margot, and I share many of the sentiments, that have been expressed about the desirability of a turf field perhaps down the road, it just seems to me like we're talking about two different things. I don't see how they're mutually exclusive. The improvements to the field that would carry us over the next several seasons would be a real boon to the program, I think, and an improvement to the facilities. And I think if we as a board and as a community decided we wanted to go toward a turf field, that's still a possibility, down the road. I see this as part of if it happens, as part of a larger project. I don't think in good conscience I could support, a capital improvement that would be primarily or almost entirely turf fields for the baseball teams. I think it would have to be tied to, as has been mentioned before, a needs assessment for the district as a whole. I think that's what I'd feel comfortable supporting. I think that's what, to your point as well, Mr. Lenzoni, that's what I think our community would be looking for. So I'm hopeful that we can move ahead, with the project as it's been proposed, perhaps with the understanding that there might be some additional costs regarding to the infield and the crowning issue. If we can get a bit more information on that, that would probably be helpful. But my feeling is, we should move ahead with what's been proposed. That's what's been planned and presented to us, going back a ways, and then also perhaps research and think, kind of prudently in a broader context about how a turf field could be a possibility down the road. That's where I stand on this. But I appreciate certainly all the effort that's gone into this, because I know it's been a while, that you've been putting this all together.
I understand that point, and I also think that spending, $94,370, if this is really in the cards, isn't exactly the best use of funds right now either. So I'm just trying to get a better understanding. I understand what you said about it coming out of left field. I think when this was brought to the board, was it you, Jeff, that first broached the concept of turf? And yeah, I believe it
Yeah,
was.
correct.
So,
I would say that the project in general came out of left field, that we were going to be doing a $100,000 repairs to the softball and baseball fields. They all came to us in October as the full part of it. And yeah, from there the discussion was asked if we could consider turf instead of, so it was all started in October, not just the turf part.
Well, just to clarify, I didn't understand the question about the turf fields when it was raised in October as as an alternative at that time. I certainly didn't understand it at that point. I understood it as a question that was being asked about an estimate of costs for comparison's sake. I certainly didn't understand it then as an alternative to the repair work that's proposed now. Maybe that was a misunderstanding, but that was my frame of mind from that point forward.
right, and I think it was was intended to be a discussion at that point, to be able to understand what our options might be and what they could look like going forward. I particularly don't like the concept of spending a lot of money if we're gonna do something different there eventually. It's just something that if we can streamline the process and get it done quickly, With building aid, we either spending the 100,000 out of the repair, which is just spending 100, we don't get any of that back. That's the money we have in a reserve for repair work. And based on some of the thoughts that we have here, I think we end up paying a little over 200,000 overall once we get building aid back for turf. And the concept for me of seeing more practice time, more games played, kind of really giving that opportunity for the kids to not have lost time out there is great. And I appreciate that they're using the football field to do some practices.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Does that impact any other sports when they're doing?
No. So track uses it, but it's, they can arrange their drills and setup to not impact our track.
Right.
So they've been using it at night, they've been using it during, after school. It's really been a great resource.
Yeah.
To continue. In the past, if this was ice and under snow, we were kind of in a waiting game, but the turf clears off much quicker, and they've really been utilizing it, even our JV teams.
Right. And the fact that we have a program where we can use the football field for rentals, I think we could also maybe possibly consider teaming up with the town of Poughkeepsie or something and making some revenue off of these fields if we were to have a turf as well. So it'd be an interesting concept to look into.
Right, that's something that the district could pursue.
I think we need to be looking towards any kinds of revenue sources we can get. It's tough on the taxpayers, obviously, we understand that, so I'm just trying to weigh the best possible product, long-term, short-term.
Yeah.
So I'm really tussling with this one. It's a difficult,
It is.
topic, and I really appreciate all of the things that you guys have brought to the table, everybody here, all the discussions by the board, the people from the public last week, or last 2 weeks ago, I guess it was. So,
But what really got me, I think one of the parents says, if one more kid could prevent from getting knocked in the teeth or a broken nose, if we can do that if we can eliminate that, this is all worth the conversation. So, you hear that, and I'm like, let's repair this field as soon as possible, and then, if you want to continue the conversations about turf, but that really got me saying, and talking to the coaches that, please let's try to get this field to safe and something that they can be proud of as soon as possible. And then if turf's an option down the road, it's an option. And if it passes down the road,
So I don't think there's any, I'll speak for myself, but I don't think anybody on the board doesn't want to see work done to the field this season. I think that's a must for safety reasons. I think it's whether or not we want to do this phase 1, phase 2, $100,000 worth, or if we need to just do what we have been doing for the past couple of years to fix up our field on it while we're considering turf. And I appreciate Richard's opinion on this, and I respect that, him sharing that with us and where he stands on it. I would share mine as well, but I'm going to read it just because I'm easier that way. I don't mumble as much. I'd like to thank everyone who's helped gather all of this information. This has been exactly the information that I've been hoping for since we first started this discussion back in October. From CPL coming in and bringing all that great data in, that's great. Anthony, thank you. I couldn't ask more from our athletic department on what they've been bringing forward for us, so that's really great. But I would like the board to consider to move forward with the option of turfing both the softball and the baseball field, and include it as a proposition to the voters in the upcoming budget. So the community can vote on that using a portion of the district's $3.75 million capital reserve fund. That was brought up last time by Richard, that should be something that the voters should get a chance to vote on, and it sounds like capital reserve funds is an option to do that with versus the repair reserve funds we cannot, for financial reasons, for legal reasons, for logistical reasons, it just does not work for us to be able to do one field right now. But my reasons for this are as followed. There's a difference between wants versus needs. If my family or I need something, then we do whatever we have to for it. If our car breaks down, we fix it. We can't go without a car. If our furnace breaks, we fix it. We can't go without heat. Depending on how much those things may cost, we may have to use a credit card or a loan to pay for these things. But if my family wants something, then we save up for it until we can afford it. Maybe a vacation, maybe a new pool, whatever it may be. We wouldn't look to pay a credit card or a loan for those kinds of things that we may want. I feel a turf field for our softball and baseball fields are a want more than a need. The district has done a good job at saving close to $6 million of taxpayer money over the past 3 or 4 years, and that using $1.7 million of the $3.75 million in our capital reserve fund is a good way to use some of that money without adding additional taxes to the backs of our taxpayers. We've heard the community members, board members, administrators. I don't think anyone is opposed to turf. I heard it said last time, when all the community members were here, that nobody was opposed to it. It's just how do we do it? So the question was just how should it be funded? The repair reserve fund is not an option, or a capital project that's been brought up. I request the board to consider using funds from the capital reserve fund for this project, and that the proposition be included in the May budget for the voters to consider. A lot of the work has already been done on this from CPL. We've gotten a lot of the information right here from us, along with a lot of the questions that we've needed answered here tonight. But let's try to get this done together. Let's try to move forward with it. I'd like to see if the board would consider giving directive to the district to allow us to move forward with this consideration, trying to get this to happen.
Just want to respond to the reality. Very nicely done. Did meet with Val, and all of us felt May would be too soon to be able to have a vote, because all that information would have to be given to the board in March, which, in order to do a needs assessment, in order to figure all that out, just probably can't be done. However, we thought the fall was possible, which would give us time to do that and to have a fall vote. We didn't think that affected, based on the timetable Chris had given us, affected the number of seasons that it would take away from, because we were under the impression that 2 seasons would before the turf would come. Lot to process, a lot of pros in each way. I guess we have to decide whether spending the amount of money for the dirt is worth it now if there's a possibility of turf coming, but it also seems like the possibility of turf coming isn't a guarantee. So you're, the concept of doing the 20,000, makes sense to do before any decision would be made on turf, in my opinion. That'll give us a chance to get true numbers and not guesstimates, but that's a commitment. I still think we're, with timing and to do it right and to get voter approval, will take time. So the investment in the dirt, I don't think would be a waste, because I think it would correct the field sooner rather than later. Allow us to do not rush, allow us to get what do you call it, that first phase? Not the design phase, the
Schematic design.
Really look at the drainage, which I think at Nassau probably will be a problem. Really look at, maybe some of the ADA, which we need to have done, so we couldn't do it without it. I think it is more in line with kind of the planning that Spack and Kill has always done, where we could plan for it and make sure it's successful versus trying to do it quickly. I'm wondering if we get the dirt, if it is done right, because I think, Marco, you had said something to me that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, you know, a well manicured field is better than turf, you know, if it's well manicured.
Wow.
You know, and I think we've learned over the years that we haven't done that. So I would hope for a commitment to well manicure our field, have a spotlight on it if the spotlight's not on it right now. You know, make the improvements. We might find that we like it, but in the meantime, do the investigation. You know, in July when the new budget season comes, we'll have budget for the 20,000. Do it. Let's see if it comes back. You know, if it comes back that it is 2.2 million, you know, maybe we could call it there. But if it comes back and it's 900,000, you know, and we could talk to some of Dan's friends to give us some of those good rates. Maybe we want to do it. You know, and at least we'll have everything in. So it seems like we could have the best of both worlds. Maybe repair it. We'll get to play on it for a season or two to see if it's worthy of what we want. But in the meantime, do the investigation to figure out whether or not turf is, I guess, feasible in a cost-effective way. And look at. Dan brought up a good idea of renting out. Like, would there be any income on renting fields out? I know that it's so hard to rent out our own fields now because we're always using it during the season, but maybe there is. You know, so that's processing all this. You know, that's what seems to kind of work. Almost get the best of both. Fix the field. Maybe we like it. If we don't, we've done the investigation. I think Dan brought up, or Jeff might have brought up, that if for some reason we don't do it right now, that stuff doesn't go bad, right? That investigation. And then if we happen to have, you know, we want to pursue it later, it's not a waste of money. We've done the amount. So it's kind of my process of all this.
I think from my perspective, listening to what Jeff said, listening to what you just said, I like the concept of knowing sooner than later what the voters want to say about it. And the only way to do that is to get it to the vote as fast as possible. So what exactly would need to be done to be able to get this onto a May proposition? So that it's during the normal time, because in my mind, I'm also thinking, if it gets shot down in May, well then, we revert right back to repair reserve, and we just do it in the fall, and the field's in great shape for the spring. Spring of '26.
The timeline for that proposition would follow the timeline for the budget. So we would have to have solid costs, because that solid costs would have to be part of that proposition. At this point, we've got estimates of what the turf is, but we have no idea of what the building piece of that is. We'd have to define what those projects are and cost those things out. And according, you'll see in my later presentation, right now the board is scheduled to adopt the budget on April 8th, which means all of that has to be solidified and in place before April 8th.
So CPL said that it'd be about a $10,000 to $15,000 estimate to repoint each building. So that's semi-estimated, established.
And that's determining if that is what we truly want to do.
Yeah, we haven't talked about needs of something. He was just trying to give an example of something that could be done for $10,000.
But that is something that needs to be done?
Yes, that
It's
is
on-
on,
yes,
that
it's
is on
on
the BCA, yep.
Right, so it's
That's
something
there.
that's already on our needs
Yes.
that could be taken off of it and used towards this, a smaller project.
If I may, I've been in, other districts where there's questions for the public that forgive me if this is not the way you guys do things, but basically polling, Mr. Kohler, if you could potentially do a poll to the community to see their thoughts on it. We typically do it with, if there's a big project that's gonna have a large tax impact, we usually go out to the community prior to that and say, hey, what's your tolerance for that? You know, is it X, you know, whatever it is, and then you get feedback, and you know, you would like to have more participation with most things, but it could give you a slice of at least some people's mentality. Just a thought.
Yeah, I'd like to circle back to the logic of, you know, when this could be feasibly voted on. And again, I'm supportive of the idea of a turf field. I don't think I'm supportive of that idea of committing to it right now. And, you know, what you're outlining, Dan, you know, let's get this to the public as quickly as possible. Seems to me, looking at it logically, more a recipe for defeating this than for ultimately getting it approved. Given some of the things that Val just mentioned, the need to tie this to a building project that would not only, you know, earn state aid, but make it more sellable to the public. You know, my history here, you know, in this district goes back far enough to remember what Mr. Lanzoni was talking about, the way in which the turf field project, the football field got defeated twice. And there was a lot of strategizing involved in how to, you know, package that and present it to the public in the context of a pretty large capital project to get it approved ultimately. And I think it was approved because people saw it as an enhancement to every part of the district and all of its buildings. I just am not confident, I have to say I'm not confident at all that a project like this could garner the support of the community if it were primarily, in terms of cost, you know, centered on the improvement of the, you know, the turf fields. There are other needs in the district, I think, that we've heard about over the last years, months, that I think would need to be addressed. I mean, I'm thinking of, you know, brought this up several times, Dr. Fanioli, the auditorium. I mean, the people who use that auditorium, here's how I think a member of the community might look at it. You know, the auditorium is used by lots and lots of our students, by members of our community, and if I think as a voter, again, this is someone who's supportive of baseball and has been involved in it for a long, long time, with my children here in the district and outside the district. But if I were a voter in the district presented with, you know, a project that was primarily a turf baseball field improvement, and I didn't see included in that a crying need, it seems to me like the auditorium, I would be, you know, have a hard time supporting it. I mean, for one thing, the auditorium services, you know, on a numbers basis, I think a lot more people than our baseball fields do. And I'm just, you know, concerned that that's how many people in the community would look at it. So for those kinds of reasons, trying to kind of move this to a point where we can vote on it quickly seems to me more like a self-defeating proposition. And I, you know, for that reason, amongst others that I mentioned earlier, I just see this as potentially a win-win if we were to go ahead with the improvements to the field that are proposed now. You know, for the next couple of seasons at least, you know, we'd have a really better facility for those students who are, you know, our students who are playing on that field. And we retain, and you know, the possibility of a longer range improvement. And maybe in that respect, the $25,000 or $20,000 is well spent. Not insignificant amount of money. I mean, that's a quarter of the amount of money that is being proposed for the enhancements to the field right now. But I think it might be money well spent if it could allow us to make a, you know, a decision that would pay off in a way that could be supported by the community. I think it'd just take more time for that. You know, just being honest. I just don't see how it's feasible in the short term.
That's great insight as far as I'm concerned. I think that's well thought out, and the history of what you've seen is very helpful. Do we have a scope generally in our mind of the auditorium type of repairs or improvements, and how long something like that would take to package up? And
We don't have a scope. I do have a meeting, coincidentally scheduled with some of the drama people and the music people to discuss their concerns. We've already met. Anthony's met with Steve Malkisher, myself, Val, to look at it, and we realized it wasn't something like we could do in the budget. You know, it's something that would require a bigger look. That's sort of what we're using this year for, to kind of go through and talk to people and look at what are the immediate safety kind of things that need to be done, and then what are the longer term things. We thought that was very possibly a capital project, or it could be a capital reserve. But again, to have those type of numbers, you know, for March, we just can't. That's what I would suggest to do. You know, saying that a little bit is, I think we just need to complete our needs assessment. You know, the idea of turf is great. The idea of turf rapidly, you know, maybe it's just my own nature. I want to plan and make sure it's the right thing for the district, and the district can afford it, along with many other things. Right, I got a call today that the heat in the high school, we had many classrooms under 55 degrees. That is something that's on our needs assessment to address the, you know, the HVAC concerns. I hear that Governor Hochul signed I call it the Air Conditioning Act, you know, that there's now heating days where if it's too hot, and I think we need to look at air conditioning some of our bigger areas in the building, you know, like a cafeteria at the elementaries or something where you can put a lot of people in if there's not enough. We just haven't fulfilled that needs assessment because we didn't know we had to, because we weren't at that stage. I did not feel we were going to ask the community to vote this year because the capital project just ending last year. I do think our budget this year will be higher than what we've had in the past. That's just a product of some funds drying up. So, you know, I know Val is even more so than me as a planner, to try to plan to make sure things are sustainable. You know, so that's just my opinion. Whether people know it or not, most of my life I was an athlete. I think as each year I get older, I'm less of an athlete. I played baseball in high school. I obviously played basketball in college. I am a full supporter of athletics. You'll see me at events. The concept of a turf field, to me, is very intriguing and exciting, and I just don't know if we're in position to do that right now, but I think we can be. I think looking at everything and putting things together, I think we can be, but that's just my opinion. You know, if the board, I love the passion, you know, I love the idea. I guess I'm here just to, you know, the people here that came here today were more towards to talk about, you know, the reality. Like, I'm confused a little bit because we get CPL giving us numbers, and then we actually have a board president who knows this stuff, you know, so I don't, most boards have that, you know, so, you know, I usually go by numbers, you know, like, hey, 2.2 million, and then he said maybe half that, 1.1 million, you know, and then we have an engineer who is saying, no, it's gonna be less than that, you know, so without me knowing that, you know, 2.2 million, that's a lot. I don't know if we could afford that, you know, if it's 300,000, yes. So, you know, that's why I'm for the $20,000 or $25,000 kind of, let's get the real numbers, let's get that right. Because in my field, I was trained to, all right, CPL says that, that's what it is. You get a couple quotes, and that's what they are. But I'm intrigued by our own knowledge on our own board. Could it be less? You know, if we go by what CPL says, I think it's a lot. If we go by a cheaper rate than that, you know, maybe it starts to bridge it down closer.
Even what CPL is saying is that those are their higher end inflated numbers that they would expect. You know, once they get back this $25,000, they'd have a better understanding of that's like sounding like their doomsday kind of price right there. So to a couple of points on it, you know, with Richard's concerns of whether or not voters would support this or not. I have the same concern if we were to throw this onto a larger capital project, that this would be one of the first things that's bumped off a larger capital project is any improvements to the turf fields, because that sounds like it was difficulty to get past just with the football field, so it's going to be that much harder with the baseball field. I would argue the opposite, that I feel that the voters and taxpayers would be more in favor of this, because this is not something that's going to increase their taxes, but it's money that is being used from money that they have saved over the past few years for these kinds of projects. Me as a taxpayer, I would prefer a bunch of mini capital projects such as this to chip away at these larger projects than having to do one large project and watch my taxes go up. So I would prefer seeing something like this saying on our proposition that we're looking to do these 2 fields with some improvements to some of the buildings, and that it's not going to increase your taxes at all, and we hope to be able to continue doing these smaller projects as we can. Again, this being more of a want than a need. I think it's a little bit easier of a pill to swallow when it's not going to be more taxes being increased because of these projects. Whereas if it's our air conditioning that needs to be fixed, or the auditorium, or heating, whatever it may be, those turn into needs that we would need to take out a loan for, a bond for it to be able to, because our capital reserve fund doesn't have that kind of funding in it. So that would end up costing the taxpayers money if we bundled this all together into one larger capital project. I would assume that we would have to take a bond out for this larger project versus chipping away at some of the things that we want to put on this larger project now.
My point was we could use the capital reserve to do some of those needs, because we would be able to do some of the HVAC stuff, some of the auditorium needs through, not a capital project, through the capital reserve. that we have.
So do you think it's something that the auditorium and the fields are within the price range of our current capital budget?
I don't know that because we haven't done the needs assessment.
That's what I was
And that was kind of, we just know
What are
that
the
it was
repairs
more than we could handle in the budget.
We also have to remember that those capital reserves
Right.
are going to help us for electric buses.
Yeah.
I
And we
was
also
just
have
gonna-
$2 million
I was just gonna
in a capital reserve fund just for our electric buses.
I'm sorry, Dean?
Don't we have $2 million in a
Yes, but
electric
at-
bus fund?
It would be a drop in the bucket.
It would be a-
That's-
yes.
That's
We're
not gonna do us
talking
much. We're trying to save a whole lot.
$300,000 for a bus, plus infrastructure, plus charging.
We were trying to save over the next few years to build that up in order to afford that. Unless we build that up, we will have to do a capital project for electric buses, if that stays.
If that's it.
You know,
Right.
again, and I don't know that, that's just what we've been told we have to follow right now, right? So we're following what you have right now. We can't buy any more diesel buses after 2027. We have to have our fleet by 2032. Will those numbers change? I was always hopeful they would get extended. We just kind of move them out a little bit.
My
but-
concern is just that if we continue delaying this, that it's going to be delayed till it's completely, not just on the back burner, but completely taken off the burners. Where right now, we have the funding to be able to do it. We have a tight time frame to try to get this on the table. I don't think that it's impossible to gather the information that's needed, even if it is just the point work or the repointing that needs to be done that's on our current needs assessment. I think that there's enough information for us to be able to have something together by March.
So you're saying the pointing, if you attach it to the turf field, that you would let the voters vote on that?
Yeah. It'd be the turf field and the pointing or whatever they're able to come up with, if there's something other than that between now and March.
So they would need a need assessment, right?
They've already done the need assessment. The repointing is part of their current needs assessment.
Well, We haven't done a needs assessment. What we
Yeah.
did is a BCS, what is it?
Yeah.
Building condition survey.
Yeah.
Building condition survey said that these are things that we should consider when we do the needs assessment. The needs assessment is kind of a deeper dive and communicate. However, we all know, I know, whereas John, like we've been talking about, we do need to do the repointing. We definitely could see spots, so we know that that is something that we would need to have done. So that's
You don't
accurate.
have to
That's
have-
accurate.
You don't have to have a needs assessment to be able to put that on to,
Do not, except, my worry is that there's other
It's not
things
enough.
that maybe should be in that, but we wouldn't put in that because we haven't done the work to do that. But that is something that we need to be done, like we know that. We've been putting it off because we've done other things. But that is on the list of things that we have to do, especially if you look coincidentally near the baseball field and where the outdoor classroom is, there's definitely some reporting that needs to be done there.
So who would do the need assessment?
Be done by us. I mean, we've worked with CPL, but we would then take, he says, the building condition survey says X, Y, and Z, then we need to explore what X, Y, and Z are, to what degree we want to do that, what's the, you know, how deep do we want to go in that? Do we want to repoint, or do we want to repoint with the best bricks in the world, or do we want, you know, our HVAC needs to be, do we want to just put the regular HVAC in? Do we want this? Do we want to add air conditioning here? Like, it's all, those are all part of a lengthy discussion.
In terms of the timeline, when would you get that done? If you said we're gonna do a need assessment?
We would probably take the rest of Val and jump in the rest of this school year to kind of,
Yeah, it would.
So it's not a month or two, it's the
No.
entire.
It would be talking with all the administration, going through all the buildings. The building condition survey usually just talks about structure, like repointing and sidewalks, but we look into the classrooms. And like Paul said, you know, HVAC, what classrooms do, what classrooms don't, what other spaces that need it, especially with Governor Hochul saying if it's 82 degrees, then kids have to move out of the classroom. So those are the kinds of things that would be in the needs assessment. We'd be looking at the interior, we'd be talking to building administrators, the teachers, that kind of thing, to get the day-to-day needs included in that study.
Do we have to vote now? Because people have to go.
well, I want, you know, every, you know, the point of this, and I'm sorry that the other thing wasn't in there, I think we all tried to, Sandra, to make sure is everything in here. And I'm sorry that we did not have that other piece that you had mentioned here before. But the point was to try to give you every bit of information so that you can make an informed decision. Nothing we're saying here is for or against. It's for this is our reality, and how to best go forward with our reality, you know? And I guess we're at that point where you are gonna be asked to vote, I guess, because unless there's other questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I gotta circle back to the auditorium stuff. We obviously are identifying it. What are some of the specific things that we are talking about, just generally? Generally specific.
Generally the specific things, just general.
Lighting,
If you can be generally
the stage,
specific.
Lighting, the sound system.
Lighting,
the
sound.
stage,
The stage, the
Seating?
floor, the seating.
Seating.
Yes,
flooring.
seating.
Yeah.
We either need new seating or we need to figure out if we could repair the seating we have.
And if you look
You
at the
keep going
stage
back and
floor,
forth every time you take seating out.
Is it still the case that they can't take heavy equipment onto the stage floor, right? It's not going to support it?
No, you can't.
There was a flybar issue a while ago,
We
right?
fixed the
That was-
flybar
that was
issue, we were
addressed.
able to do that, that
addressed.
was an immediate, so we actually found funds for that. You know, it really just hasn't been touched in a meaningful way since it was redone. 2000, I don't know when it was redone, probably around there. It was before I got here, but it was redone. I don't know because we haven't done that, but we would like to do it. I know, Anthony, is there any, you mean, you electrical issues, right, there's,
Yeah, I think there's some electrical issues, there's seating, there's flooring, acoustics, house lights, yeah, sound system. It kind of, the list goes on, and there are things that we really have to hone in on, again, necessity as opposed to want, and so on, and.
part of my meeting that was coming up with you know, some of the drama people is to identify some things that we could pick away at. You know, so instead of a capital project, which I think we wanted to do at this point, as you know, kind of brought up, is there something, all right, so is there an electrical issue that we could use either through the budget or through the capital reserve in order to address that? So that's really, that's where we are with that. Literally, when's the meeting? Next week?
Maybe Monday.
I think she said she couldn't make Monday, but it might not be Monday.
No, maybe.
So generally, what would at what point would we know approximately how much should be put into the auditorium overall versus what we could do with capital reserve? 'Cause this sounds like an awful lot. It sounds like a basic revamp of the whole thing, so.
Yeah. We'd have to bring everybody, you know, the experts in there, lighting, sound.
Chris, I'll put you on the spot. How
Yeah.
much? What are we talking about here?
Couple mil,
Yep.
couple mil, 2 million at least with all that? Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yep. Auditoriums are expensive, and you know,
Right.
part of that kind of needs assessment is really, you know, we would bring from the building condition survey kind of the nuts and bolts of things and say, hey, you know, I don't need anybody to tell me the condition of a window, right? I can look at that purely and be like, okay, that needs to be replaced. But then, you know, some of the things that Val was mentioning, meeting with the different buildings and meeting with different user groups is hugely, hugely important, because those are the things that we don't see on a day-to-day basis. We call that the programmatic work. I can't tell if your cafeteria is too small based on that, you know, so it things, I mean, I could, but in essence, you know what I'm getting at. So really that, and then the priority of all that. So you're gonna have, typically the way the process goes, if you're really prepping for a capital project, is that you put everything on paper and it's gonna be way more than you could ever imagine. But then you gotta chip away at it, you know. A lot of school districts in New York State, you know, have buildings this vintage, large, huge institutional type buildings that take a lot of money to revamp certain building systems. So, but all part of the process, all part of, you know, actually I love that process. I love meeting with the people that actually use the space and here and there, pain points and things like that, because really at the end of the day, we're just trying to solve the problem, you know, so.
And how realistic is phasing an auditorium project like that? Is it best to do all at once? Is it?
Typically, yeah, if you have the ability to kind of do it all at the same time, it's helpful. I always, for an example, I would rather, if you were to renovate a science wing of a building, I would rather do one science classroom fully than 6 science classrooms phased and get some things here, certain things here, because the way we have to do public bidding construction and separate prime construction, where we have a separate general contractor, separate mechanical contractor, all that is it could be done. We do it every day, but it's just more layers to it. It's a little tougher to, you know, gather everybody.
I think there's some things that are more of a safety issue that need to be done sooner with the auditorium, where waiting. So that's what some of these meetings are for.
Sure,
To figure
yeah.
out, all right, which components should we just do now, and which components can we do later, either via the same mechanism, budget,
Right.
capital reserve. Because if you can do some of those, you could chip away and then not have to do the capital project for that specific thing.
Right.
Or at least get the urgent things done and then do the seating another time, you know.
Sure.
The seats still work, so that's not
Right.
urgent, but
Right.
like, you know,
Right.
if the lighting's not working, or there's a hole in the stage or whatever, we want that taken care of.
Yep.
Before I do like the seats and.
Sure.
Do you think some of these urgent repairs that need to be done could be tied into
We could.
this?
Yes.
Instead of doing a repointing, of doing these things that need to be done right away?
I do think that I would prefer, or I think in the email I sent the board was that if we are able to do a needs assessment, I think I would have different things tied to the interior, or maybe not different, more tied to the interior versus.
It sounds like you have
So-
some things that are urgent right now to pick from though.
Real quick before, so it's a different building. We're talking about the high school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
thank you.
separate project number, it's like its own world now. It's like, everything is so separate. They're just so building obsessed. That's the way
So
it
that
is.
doesn't count
That's a good
towards.
point. Yeah, so
When
Use of the
that's why
capital
we're-
reserve
Well,
has to be also kind of looked at as separate.
Right, if you're building
No,
it.
he means it won't give aid to
Yeah.
the turf field, so we
Right,
need the,
right.
we need the interior.
So we just need to
Yeah.
repoint.
Yeah, yeah,
So
we
it's
still
still-
go to repointing.
all goes back
But we
to
might
repoint,
add
so.
the auditorium stuff to it, it's a very good point.
Right, well, yeah, so.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if there's something that's urgent that needs to get done now that's outside of our budget, then we could use capital reserve funds for right now to make these urgent repairs that tie into what,
Well,
you know, the consideration. of
isn't that also the repair reserve?
What's that?
The repair reserve could be used for that as well then.
Could be,
I guess so, yeah, you're
could
right.
be. It just goes back to we haven't had those conversations, because we know we needed to do it now, but we didn't know, it wasn't on our plan to do that right this moment, because we weren't gonna go to the community for it, and those meetings were just being set up literally coincidentally, not because of this, but,
Well, that's an interesting question, so, not to prolong this, but if repointing, for example, brickwork could be considered repair, how could it also be considered capital improvement? I mean, this is the opposite side of the discussion we were having earlier, right? So then we'd have to get into all of that.
Right.
It's building work, I guess, is the differentiation there.
Yeah, internal building work, is that how it's viewed by the
It-
state?
it- It could just be building work, it's, I mean,
but this is a capital reserve.
we talk for hours
Yeah,
on what you just
yeah.
mentioned, honestly. It's subjective, a touch. The state education department doesn't want, in capital projects, they don't want to see repairs.
Yeah.
But, you know, a repair to one is a different.
I think what he's talking about is the confusion, the difference between the repair reserve and the capital reserve, because some items in the repair reserve were considered capital things and they're out, so would repairing the auditorium be a capital reserve project or a repair reserve project? So we have to, that's all part of the needs assessment and figuring out what that is, but you are correct, it might be, might not be able to use the capital reserve for that if it's not new stuff. It's interesting. That's part of.
You can't use the repair reserve fund. And you can't use the repair reserve fund either. Okay.
Do we ever authorize CPL to do that study for the electric charging and what that infrastructure was gonna cost? I think we talked about that a while back, I don't know if we ever authorized it or.
We have done just the study to see where we could physically put the buses, but now the next step of that is to work with Central Hudson to see what upgrades are gonna be needed and all of that. But the initial study that's been done says that we can keep our buses right where they are, we can have them all there. So now we just have to get to the Central Hudson piece and the infrastructure piece and see what that's gonna cost.
Okay, so we don't have those numbers
We
yet.
don't have them.
Okay.
It's a little bit of game of chicken too. We don't want to get into it too early where it becomes obsolete, or
Yeah.
if it happens to go away.
Agreed.
But we don't want to be too far behind. And that was the theory of putting the money in the reserves, is at least we're doing something to save, so when we have to make our move, there would be some money there to make a move. Like if we have to buy 5 buses, maybe we have enough in that fund to do that. Or we have to put in half of our charging stations because we don't have a a full fleet of 15, 16, you know, we might be able to do that and then replenish it and then do so. There's just a lot of questions, you know, there's no answers because of the, I don't say vagueness, because of the uncertainty of the electric bus mandate, but it remains steadfast in it at this moment. That's also, we could learn a lot, like if we, again, were to do the dirt work and then do the assessment on the fields, the $25,000 thing, that would buy us time to see maybe the electric bus thing goes away, maybe it doesn't. You know, I guess just maybe the board could help us understand, what's the urgency of turf? Is it just simply don't want to spend the money on the dirt if we're gonna turf, right?
That's my personal concern, yes.
I also agree with that, but I also am concerned if we continue just tabling it over and over, or putting it off over and over, that it will get
So
lumped
we
into
have,
a larger capital.
It's never come up before. I mean, we've never talked about it before.
No, I know, I'm just saying, like,
It's
that's
over and over.
my
I
concern
think
with
that's
it.
misleading.
With the spotlight that's now on the field, do you think it's worth giving it a shot to see if we can get a well-maintained dirt field? Or do we think we just think that's not gonna happen?
we don't know.
No, I mean, my preference would not to do that. I would prefer to see a turf field over a dirt field.
And how come?
Multiple reasons, but, you know, if you speak with any kid who's played on a turf field versus a baseball field, or a dirt field, they're gonna prefer turf. I've spoken with the coaches that would prefer having turf. Our field currently has a drainage problem, where turf may be a solution to that. We have shading over the fields that's making it so it's not drying out. Even if it does have good drainage, if it's a rainy day out and that field gets wet, it's not gonna be used where you can play on a turf field in the middle of the rain. I've been through full tournaments in the middle of a turf field. You know, the maintenance of it, you don't have to continue to line it, you don't have to have your kids staying after practice, or Mr. Lanzoni out there breaking the fields or putting down lines, you know, I can go on with benefits of it, but that's my reasoning for it.
We talk about the rain, is there a lot of rainouts? Like, I
So,
just
yeah,
don't know.
we talked about it with the coaches. We don't have any more postponed games than they feel, and I feel, talking to athletic directors, we don't have any more than anybody else in our league.
Well, also,
We-
nobody else has any other turf fields, right? So they're in the same boat
Right,
as we are.
everybody's in the same boat, yeah, so it's not unusual to have, you know, depending, it was dry the one spring, so we maybe had a couple. We had a rainy season a few years back, so we had
It's
maybe
also-
5.
Not to interrupt, but it's not just the games, it's practices that get canceled. It is a very short season, regardless, so to not be able to have practices because it's raining. It's spring, I mean, spring is known for heavy amounts of rain.
Does that, I mean.
So they use the gym, and then they'll utilize the high school turf field at times as well. Especially early in the season. You know, we were in March, we used to get a lot more ice and snow years ago too. But you're right, that shaded area did take a while for that home plate area to dry out. And we didn't have an alternative, so it was a lot of indoor practices. But the high school turf field has helped with that some.
And there are other schools that are considering putting in turf. I know Wappingers has it on their capital project right now to add 3 turf fields, 2 softball fields, multi-use fields. So there are other school districts around us that are putting them in.
Did the voters
What's that?
decide upon the turf?
No, they're being proposed.
It's a
They're
capital
part of
project for
a
Wappingers.
proposition to the voters to vote on.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I just was made aware of it myself.
They're putting up a capital project, but I didn't see the contents of it.
Right.
But I know Wappingers was putting up
I had to sit through the entire thing, so I definitely picked up on that one.
I mean, in my opinion, we've done a really good job of creating a great track. You know, we have football and soccer. Now our gymnasium at the high school has been really revamped with seating and the flooring, so now we've got basketball and volleyball. We were talking about these incredibly important things for the tennis court too. The tennis courts really need that.
Thank you for
So
bringing that up.
tennis courts are gonna be there now too. So then it leaves the baseball and the softball. And the reason I think we're belaboring this point on this is because now this is money that's gonna go towards baseball and softball, what's being presented to us. And is there a better option overall? You know, so that's why I'm having the hard time that I am with this, of just allowing the dirt to go in at this point.
Yeah, so I agree with all of those improvements that have been made, and that was part of the reason why Coach and I wanted to sit down with Anthony and kind of go over those, discuss the field and how it's playing and what we thought could bring it up to par. So we're on the same wavelength, and that's where it initiated.
I did speak with Coach Neese about it as well, to make sure I wasn't stepping on his toes about it, and yourself as well, to
Yeah.
make sure I didn't step on your toes with it. But he also said the same thing, that, you know, having a turf field would be beneficial to the program, to practices, to the drainage issues that they have, to, you know, just the overall, you know, baseball experience.
I mean, you look at our football, soccer, well, it was a football team at the time, and to where it is now, yeah, it was, you know, it does alleviate a lot of those issues.
Right. And it's a program that, you know, we're proud of all of our programs, but this is a program that has three different state championships. I didn't even know we had three. I thought we only had two, but apparently we had three.
Well, two recently, and one back in the 6.
So, I mean, it'd be nice to give them that same support back and, you know, be able to have a good facility for them. Not that the dirt wouldn't be, I just think that the turf would be a better option than dirt. I think, I really don't know if a baseball player, if asked if they had a choice between playing on dirt or turf, they're gonna choose dirt as their home field.
I think if you ask our current players, you know, if we can do some work to repair that field, to make it safe for the next couple of years, I think they would absolutely say, please.
I agree. I also think if we asked those same players if we could have turf in the next year or two, which would you prefer? And they would say turf.
Yeah, but
Maybe
again,
they say
this
both.
this is what it comes
They might
down
say
to.
both.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see how a turf field is feasible within the next year or two. It just seems like we keep going around in circles on this. I understand the passion, I understand all the points, and I agree with them longer term, but it just seems like there's such an advantage to be gained for the current. When you talk about wanting to support our baseball team right now, well, this would be a way to do it.
CPL just told us that they could do it within 2 seasons. So.
Possibly,
if
if
everything
everything
got-
went right, possibly by.
If everything
26.
falls right, if the voters, there's so many ifs
Correct.
involved with that. If the voters approve it, if, you know, state ed comes through, you know, and so forth, it just
And
seems
that
like there's so
we're
many
looking at the same
contingencies.
ifs with our current field. If it's not raining out, if the fields aren't flooded, we should be able to get the clay done. We should be able to get phase 1 done, not phase 2 until the next year. So there's the same ifs, and you know, you can argue, you're right, we can go around in circles with it, that's fine. So the current item that's tabled is if we're moving forward with the current repair reserve funds proposal as is. And I would propose an amendment to it. I would be,
Propose away then.
I propose that the repair reserve remain the way that it is, minus the 90, I don't have the number in front of me now, the 95,000 for baseball, softball.
Just shy of 95.
94 through 70.
With the understanding that we are still going to do the regular maintenance work that we do each year to those fields, of bringing in the sand, of bringing in the, you know, the routine work that we would keep to maintain that field that we've done every year up to this point.
Okay, with the understanding that it's gonna play just as it has in the past.
For this year, yeah. Yep. And then if
I just
we
have-
find that we
Until
can't.
it's
So
addressed.
we find that we can't do it, we'll be in the same position a couple of months from now that we can come back and revisit a repair reserve fund request on it. And it'll still be ready for the 2026 season, as most of this would be done in 2026 season anyways.
I think it's 2 baseball seasons that it would take. Just want to be clear
Possibly,
on that. Yeah, yeah.
possibly.
So, That's all, just one clarity.
No, I agree. It's more than likely, I would agree with you, that it's gonna take 2 seasons, but it's possible that it could happen in 2026 if things go smoothly.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So the backstops were part of that 90,000, that breakdown, would we still want to do some of the work if you're gonna pull?
Oh, I honestly, I don't know what the, it didn't say anything about
Doesn't say that.
backstops in phase 1 or phase 2. And Anthony's shaking his head
Backstops
no.
are in the turf.
Yeah, they were in the turf.
Yeah, they were in the turf, just, there was no new, there were not new backstops in the dirt.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
The CPL had said that you probably need new backstops if you're gonna put turf in, and probably lead suits, you probably will need new dugouts.
I would just speak, again, my concern is if we're spending $100,000 now on this versus doing a capital project that we could get a majority of that back from the state and only cost us $200,000. I'd rather get 2 turf fields for $200,000 than 2 dirt fields for $100,000.
Your numbers, I don't know, I just want clarity, I don't think it would be $200,000.
Yeah, I mean, there's too many contingencies.
Yeah, but regardless, your point is, it goes back to everything. Do you want to spend $100,000 now, and then possibly 2 years from now, have exhausted that because we haven't kept up with it and put a turf field in? I think that's really what you're asking.
So how much would it cost us to repair the fields without this $100,000?
In order to do it right, that's what we have to do. And any other way, I think Marco said it would just play the way it's been playing.
If we do our regular maintenance,
What does our regular maintenance consist of?
Yeah, we've already done some edging of the field that's been done in the fall, so that we're ahead of the game in spring. We will bring in some clay. Obviously, we won't remove the amount of clay that we would be doing. We might pull a little bit out, but mostly we just kind of lay down on top, re-edge, reline, and do a little bit of overseeding. Costs are nominal, and it's not going to address most of the issues that we're trying to address in the repair reserve.
How big of a difference do you see that where you're still bringing in clay but possibly not digging it up? Digging it up sounds more like it's for the drainage part of it. But as far as the play goes and our concerns of, I'm assuming that the balls popping up and hitting kids in the face is what we really want to try to avoid. Do you think that bringing in this clay as a secondary option would help alleviate some of that?
I do, yeah, I do, especially given the expertise of the contractor and the grading process. I also know that the infield, the grass, if I'm correct, that's kind of a bit of an issue of the inconsistency of the ball popping and all that. So while it's unlikely that we'd be able to topsoil and seed the infield for this season, it would certainly be ready for next season.
So
Were
just
you
to,
opposed?
just to clarify, my proposal would be to keep the capital reserve, I'm sorry, not the capital reserve, the repair reserve proposal as is minus the baseball portion of it, and still have the regular maintenance done that we have been doing. Additionally, I think you said you're okay with us moving forward with the $25,000 on the data collection from CPL?
Well, wouldn't we have to authorize that as well?
No, but that's something we wouldn't be able to do until July.
The new budget.
Just,
'Cause
I struggle with that we aren't able to come up with $25,000 to do this study before July.
That's it just would be at a cost. We wouldn't do something that we had earmarked it for, which is fine.
If that's
That's
what the
what
board
you
wants,
want
we
us
will
to-
figure out what we
That-
want.
yeah.
I would want to see what we're cutting off or putting a
That-
strict on until,
And that would,
That's
yeah.
a hard thing to say, especially halfway through the year,
Yeah,
because I don't know what's coming between now and May.
yeah, I don't wanna do that.
I had another question, I'm sorry. So if a project was presented to the community, turf fields and some indoor work, and it was defeated, where would we go, what's the next step for repairing the baseball
Right back to
field?
this.
Right back to this.
We'd have to propose another repair reserve.
Yeah.
That would be in it. We'd have to have another hearing, and
Yeah.
then the board would vote on it.
And what's that timeline?
It'd be
We don't know
2026.
until we know
Correct.
when the vote is.
Correct.
Well, if we really can't get to a vote until the fall, then doing that work in the fall is out of the question then. So then we're in the same position where it's weather dependent for 26. And I don't love that.
So it really
Just
delays
based
us
on-
2 years.
Just based on
Yeah.
SCD's timeline for budget votes. And Sandra just verified for me that everything would have, that the resolution as it would appear on the ballot would have to be set in March.
So the end of March, the March 26th or something was the
March
date?
26th, board
March
meeting, we
26th.
have to approve the resolution in
So we-
order for me to,
Include it on the ballot.
on the ballot.
Well, we normally, we present that to you the week, the board meeting before that, because you need to see it. and then-
Early March.
There's also, since this is exterior work and disturbing land, there would be a SECRA requirement here, so the State Education Quality Review Act. So there's a long process with that piece of it as well. So that has to do with, the voting and Part 1 environmental assessment forms, and declaring lead agency. So it's quite the process too. And then there's legal timelines of that, and with votes and getting them into local newspapers. So the time just goes.
So you're adding time to the turf timeline right now? In essence?
For the secret processes, you would have to go through the secret process, and it's basically an investigation of it. So
You think it's a type 1 action?
I wouldn't say it would be, because if it's over, I would have to rely on Tim for that. I wouldn't necessarily say it would be type 1. I think it would probably, you would have basically a field there already, so you're kind of replacing that field. But
Type 2,
But yet you're doing,
which is ministerial.
yeah, but you would have to do your due diligence no matter what, with all the different,
Yeah.
wildlife and all that type of stuff too.
Yeah, repairs and stuff of that nature are type 2, so.
Right, but we would have an in-house planner to review all that, especially if you're getting into drainage structures and things and piping going farther from the field, stuff like that. So I just wanted to bring it up just so it doesn't,
But what is the impact of that? So the turf field timeline would be extended a little bit because we have to do the SECRA if
yeah,
we go that way.
right, but if you're going, if you're gonna do a vote on the potential project, you would have to do the secret process prior to that as well too. So it's, no matter what the project is, as Mr. Kohler probably knows, it's like you gotta do the secret process. And typically, so if you're doing a roofing project, simple, type 2, you're done.
Yeah.
But you would still have to declare lead agency and things like that. That's where the data collection of this is so important, because then that would have your secret implications as well, depending on certain things.
So I guess that brings us back to whether or not to approve the dirt in the reserve. Just process everything you've heard here tonight, ask any further questions, and then I guess we could vote. I think there's a way to have the best of both worlds, where we could do the repairs, take the time to, figure out if it's feasible, and take the time to maybe put something to the voters that would be more balanced. But it's up to the board to decide that and let us know what you want to do. I do think doing the 25,000 makes sense, either now or in July, or authorize it in July. I don't know if that really hurts our timetable a whole lot if we wait until July. 'Cause I think we've
I think
already.
it does.
Because it takes 4 months to do that.
I think we're already 2 seasons out, and I don't think that will affect more than 2 seasons, but if the hope was to try to get it done in 1 season, then that would squash that. I don't think 1 season would happen, but, you never know. But I get it. It's a decision you have to make.
Yeah, much better estimates can be made on the extent of the turf if we did the $25,000 study. And then we would have more information to be able to pivot at that point if we needed to.
So where would we get the $25,000 at this point?
We need to authorize the district to do that.
And Val said, you know, she can do that, but it's going to cost some other areas.
Possibly.
And I wanna know what the other areas are. I don't wanna
Understandable.
sacrifice, you know.
No, I would-
I
I
don't
mean, I'll
wanna
just say I'm not
sacrifice-
prepared to vote
Yeah,
on that either
I-
right now, to approve that. You know,
Well,
I'm not the same mind.
fine, it's by majority, so I would be in favor of authorizing the district to do that now.
Well, Ken, how are these things related, you know, that we're considering here? It just seems like we're kind of moving several different directions here at the same time. I mean, we've got a motion that's been brought back. We're still considering that motion. Now we're entertaining another, I mean, I'm not sure where we are.
Well, one kind of influences the other. If we can do the $25,000, approve the district to do that, start that, then we'll have a better idea for whether or not it's even feasible to do a turf field or not.
So I need to know where the money's coming from. I would not approve that. Like, I need to know where the money's coming from.
Doing it now just puts us in a tough spot. I don't think we want to do that.
Which puts us in a tough spot, because then we're talking about using $100,000 and towards something that we might be replacing in 2 years. So
Can we table
I
it?
can't,
And
I can't see
revisit it?
spending $100,000 to do something if we're gonna be redoing it in 2 years.
No, can we table this
No.
subject and revisit it?
And
What,
Wait,
the
next.
repair reserve project or the 25,000? I mean, I'm gonna be very frank here. I'm gonna be very frank. It seems like, you know, what's being proposed in terms of delaying the vote on the repair reserve project is factually, I think that objectively, is just delaying the possibility that that can happen in such time as will benefit current players on our baseball teams. It seems as if, you know, we're cutting off our nose to spite our face, you know, to use an image. Introducing these other contingencies and conditions just seems to make it less and less likely that, you know, that the field will be improved in the short term. And while $100,000 is a lot of money, I would agree. My view is that it's worth it for what we would gain in the short term for the current players in the team, which you two are professing is your primary concern. So I'm just increasingly puzzled by this. I have to be very honest. It just seems like, again, I agree with what Paul said earlier, we could have both here, potentially. We can have something in the short term at a not terrible cost, money that's already accounted for in the repair reserve fund, and we can retain the possibility of a turf field in the future in a way that makes it more responsible, I think, to the community, and also not to say it's even less, strategically more doable, I think, in terms of the support that we would need from the community. So to me, it just seems like, you know, I've said this enough times, I don't know how many times I can say it. I think we could have both. I think we should go ahead with the one now. It doesn't preclude doing the study, the $25,000 study, but I think, two, we should do that in a responsible way. I agree with Sasha. We should do that in a responsible way. And I'll just be honest, I think we're abdicating our responsibility to the entire community if we rush through and rush into these things.
Marco, would you come to the podium for a minute?
Yeah, I don't know, I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn, but the tennis courts we've talked about last year, you know, there's a real need for the tennis courts to get done. So my fear of tabling and moving this, I know, you know, once we get this approved, Anthony can start working on getting schedules. The June to May to August is the busiest time for these companies that resurface tennis courts. And I really hope that we can get this approved so we can get it on the schedule. Because I don't know how many more seasons our tennis courts are going to be playable.
So let's vote. That's it.
Okay, so we can either entertain a motion to accept the item 4.02 as written, or we could have an amendment to it. Is your motion, is it an actual formal motion? Did you make a formal motion here?
Yeah, I can make a motion to amend the repair reserve proposal to remain as is, minus the baseball, softball portion of it. With the understanding that the regular maintenance is still going to be done on the field that Anthony had spoken of play being, some play or some work still being done on that field to prepare it for the season. And then if we find we can't move forward with the turf capital project, then I would want to revisit this again and consider using the repair reserve fund for these phase 1, phase 2 proposals.
Is that all part of the motion? I'm not even sure if procedurally we can add things like that to a motion about a.
Okay, so
A
just
current-
a motion
a
to
current reserve
amend it
budget.
then. So just the motion to amend it and remove the baseball portion of it. And then authorize them to do that afterwards.
Okay, so there's a motion to accept the repair reserve fund resolution as written minus the baseball and softball. Is there a second for that motion? All right, I'll second it. So we can do a vote. I guess we'll do a roll call, just to be very clear. Joanne?
No.
No. Richard?
No.
Sasha?
No.
No. Jeff?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, and I guess I would say yes since I seconded the motion. So now we have a vote, and it's no. I think what Marco said is very concerning to me. I do want the tennis courts to be done. Sorry. Just trying to figure out how to procedurally get something done tonight,
I think we can move
being that
forward
we're here.
with the original. I think just move forward with the original.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, is there a motion to accept the repair reserve fund as written?
So moved.
Okay, Richard, is there a second?
Second.
Sasha, okay, again, let's do a roll call vote then.
Yes.
Yes? Richard?
Yes.
Yes. Sasha?
Yes.
Yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Yes. And I will vote yes then as well. So that passes. 5-0. Appreciate everybody's patience out there. Trying to get through something difficult here. Okay, that being said, I would still like to move forward with at least the study. If there's a way to figure out how you can tell us exactly what possibly could be removed, so we could do the study sooner than later, and then we'll at least know. Because for me, it's a lack of knowledge at this point. I'd like to know.
We can find the money.
Let's look through it.
Just-
We'll get back to it next time.
Yeah.
Excuse me,
You know what we have to do.
and I could solicit the sub-consultants and get hard numbers for those.
Please.
Thank you.
So we'll do that on our end, and we'll forward that to the
Thank
team.
you.
Yeah, that'll give us something to consider because, you know, obviously if the weather doesn't allow this work to be done, we find out that that this is a real option, we can still not use that money at that time.
And I think, as you said, this money won't go to waste, because even if we don't turf our fields, we'll have the schematics for the future.
Right.
And maybe we'll discover some drainage stuff we need to work on anyway, which I'm sure we will discover.
So are we authorizing that 25,000 now?
I believe he asked us to see if we could find it, and we're gonna get back to everyone.
And Chris will get us some
Chris is gonna
hard
give us
numbers.
Solid numbers.
Yeah.
So we're
So
not,
from both
we're not
sides.
spending that money
Yeah.
yet until we could see if we could find a spot for it.
Okay.
But worst case scenario, we are planning for July 1, because that's when our new budget starts. So we're either gonna have it sooner, I think the board clearly said, sooner knowledge is better, so we'll see if we can do that. Give us that task, we'll work on that.
All right. Again, thank you for your patience, everybody. With that, we'll move on to 6.01. It's a presentation from our business administrator.
Chris and Anthony, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Need a break?
Would that be appropriate to do now?
Yeah,
Val, would that be
absolutely.
okay?
Yeah.
We see a gentleman from Chestnut here? Yeah, would you like to tell us who you are and what you're holding?
We have a check presentation for you guys for the district. And my name is Ahmad Ramzi. I'm the marketing coordinator for Chestnut Market. And we were running a program last year. It's called Exxon Pump for a Cause. So every 3 cents per gallon from a customer, we use that money toward donation towards schools. So we've been doing it across 80 locations between New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So we're donating to schools.
How did you choose us?
We actually have one down the on South Road. So we saw you guys in the area, so we offer the program. So.
Yes, please choose us all the time.
Did we have to apply or anything?
No,
Or did you
we
just do this from your side?
So I actually called you guys and I spoke to, I think her name is Stephanie Martyr or something.
I'm sorry?
I forgot her name. I spoke to.
You spoke to Stacy McIntyre.
Stacy, yes?
Yes, yes.
And I mentioned her the program, then she got back to me, so you guys accepted the donation. So.
Yeah, she came to us
Yeah.
and we were very excited about your program.
Yeah, so it's actually going to be a uni program, so every year there's going to be a donation. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
Thank
So what are you presenting us?
A check for $2,150. That's how much we collected this year. So.
Wow, that's excellent. Thank you so much.
Probably wants a picture.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, 'cause I think you want to come closer to the board?
Get the whole board, yeah.
Just waited long enough for the picture.
All right, just come down, come to the middle. That's a good stretch, bro. Everyone come to the middle. John, are you able to take a picture of us?
No, I came from New Jersey.
All right, that's why we're getting out of here. You're tall, get that.
You know, that's just.
Come in front of me, I'm not sure. Come in front of me.
Oh, you should be in there. Paul, right. Did you hear me?
You should be in here.
No.
All right, say John on 3. No, Chestnut on 3.
Thank you, Chestnut. Got it.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Here, give it to this guy right here.
Wonderful.
Does he get the check, or you gotta wipe it off for
No,
someone
I'm
else?
there.
Next.
Legal tender. Legal
tender.
So I was earlier in Old Life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Personally.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. Have a good night, guys. Thank you.
Maybe I'll see the water.
Any more I'll be with after.
Worried about that too.
I'll be back.
Okay, you're up, Val.
I'm up. It's that time of year again, and this is the first and probably the simplest of our budget presentation. This is a recap of the current year's budget. The 24-25 budget is $53,938,245, which represents a 3.89% increase over the 23-24 budget. The current tax levy to support our current budget is $33,086,739, which represents an increase of 1.7% over the 23-24 tax levy. Just getting started on the budget for the 25-26 school year. Some of the assumptions that are currently on the table is the change to the teachers' retirement system. Right now, the state estimates that it may decrease a little bit to somewhere between 9.5 and 10% of salaries. Conversely, the employee retirement system is anticipating an increase from 15.2% to 16.5%. The CPI for last year is 2.9%, and that's just the overall price increase for the state. Another budget assumption is something that we've been talking about kind of tangentially, which is all those stimulus grants that we got for COVID have officially ended as in September of 2024. Other budget assumptions, the collective bargaining agreements that are currently in place, and we also have several contracts that will be ending in June of 2025, so we will have estimates for increases that will apply to those particular bargaining units. BOCES services, speaking with the business official at BOCES, somewhere between a 5 to 8% increase. Matt Metzger will be visiting us at some point in the next few weeks to give us a little bit more clarity on at least the administrative portion for the BOCES services. So the cost of BOCES services will increase, but we're also, as a district, we're using more BOCES services. So there's going to be an increase with additional services plus the cost of services that we're using. Special education tuition, just based on historical numbers, we're looking at a 5 to 8% increase on those. DHIC health insurance, 6 to 8% increase. That number hasn't been quite finalized yet. That's kind of the range for right now. And for debt service, we don't anticipate any additional borrowing unless the board has a capital project that I don't know about yet.
Is that an attempt at humor?
I can't hear anything on your side. I'm trying so hard, I can't hear anything.
It might be good.
It's all peanuts going
That was
on.
okay.
She just took a big swipe at you.
Of course you can. I deserve it. I deserve it.
I'm
I'm
sure
okay
what
with that. I'm just reading.
Okay, other budget factors that will, will contribute to the budget. Any retirements and additional staffing requirements. So we may recognize some breakage in replacing some of our retiring staff, but we also may have some staffing changes or additional staffing, which is right now being talked about. The final BOCES numbers, the final TRS and ERS numbers, and the final health insurance increases will definitely have an impact. If it falls within that 5 to 8% range, or if it falls lower or higher, that could impact the budget. Vehicle purchases, right now, I believe we're going to need 2 transportation vehicles. We may need 1 facilities vehicle. one of the transportation vehicles is gonna be a bus, a fuel-based bus. And what we're doing now, because we have basically 10 years at the current law to replace all of our fuel buses, we wanted to buy another bus this year so that we would have fuel buses that would last us 10 years out. So as we gradually replace, we wanted to make sure we had enough of our own current vehicles that would see us through the next 10 years.
Can I ask a question? I actually heard you.
Oh.
When's the last year that we're allowed to stop, or that we're not allowed?
2027.
Okay, so we have one more year of still being able to
To buy
hopefully
fuel
buy.
buses.
Okay, unless that changes.
Unless that changes, yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Again, the end of stimulus grants, those grants were used to fund some of the social emotional programs like Abbott and P2. So now those costs associated with those programs will not have to be in the general fund budget. And the biggest piece is Governor Hochul today gave her state of the state and released her budget numbers. I took a quick look at the budget numbers. It looks like we are not hurting. We have not been cut. So based on her budget, which is not the final budget, we will see a bit of an increase in state aid. Not a huge increase, but an increase.
The big hubbub and worry about foundation aid, I think we probably avoided this year. I think a lot of the work some of the superintendent groups did in talking, the damage that reducing foundation aid as dramatically as was thought. So in today's, I only read the briefing of it, it looks as if some of our biggest fears are not there. So that's good.
The overall budget process is a line by line by function. So there's facilities, there's instructional budgets, transportation budgets, and also instructional budgets by building. I will be meeting with all of the building administrators and with Marco and with Anthony to get their ideas of what they need for the next year. So that's going to be conversations going on amongst all the administrators and myself and Dr. Fanuelli. And as we prioritize all of the wish lists, we will have budget modifications along the process and come up with a draft budget, which will be presented to the board with explanations of, what went into those budget numbers. Dr. Fanuelli, once we come up with what we believe is the best budget, will present that as the superintendent's recommended budget to the board. We will ask the board to adopt that budget, and at that point, you will be presented with a three-part budget, which will divide the budget into administrative costs, program costs, and capital costs. The budget calendar is, as we see here at the next meeting, I may have some more details about initial assumptions, may get some more clarity on Governor Hochul's numbers. On the 25th, we'll have an indication of what the key factors are for the budget, and those are those big areas like BOCES and salaries and insurance benefits and retirement costs. On the 11th, board discussion with update, probably present a real budget number, a first draft of a real budget number. The 25th, Dr. Fanuelli will present the recommended budget for the board. On April 8th, we'll be asking the board to adopt that budget. May 6th is the legally required public hearing on the budget. And May 20th, we will have a budget vote and an election for one trustee. And we also may have, I'm thinking of we have a bus reserve for the bus purchases, as opposed to putting that number in the budget. And that concludes the first budget presentation.
Comments or questions from the board?
Sal, that last part, you said the bus reserve, that's separate from the electric bus reserve?
Yes, it is.
Great.
That was a reserve that was set up years ago before
That's
electric
great.
buses went home.
That's great.
Historically, we've needed to use that to purchase a bus. Al was very good, and we actually used the budget purchased a bus last year, but usually it's through the reserve.
Anyone? Val, quick question for you. You're mentioning about those programs that we're using coming out of the general fund now,
Mhm.
as opposed to some of the federal aid that we had coming in, the COVID money and all that.
Yes.
So things like Avid and all that. Have we done an analysis of the efficacy of programs such as that? And then have those replaced others that we now don't have to purchase and things like that? Are we kind of scalpeling out some of the old stuff, or?
I would defer to my instructional experts.
Yes, we actually had a talk, we were talking about some of our summer programming that we don't think is as effective as it has been. So yeah, we're looking at, plan obsolescence, as they call it. So yeah, we do specific to Avid. We actually just had recent meetings, and I saw Dan back there. He'll probably jump up. The feedback we have from Avid has been excellent. So we definitely are, still pursuing, running that with Fidelity.
Yeah, we've heard those presentations on Avid, and I think everybody's been impressed about that. I was really more concerned about some of the old stuff that we could, kind of move on with some of the newer programs, and then you're going to hear this from me until it's ever done. The IBM pilot.
Yes. That is, I had a very preliminary conversation with the town supervisor, and she had not really gotten into that process yet. I will follow up with her during this whole budget process to see how far along and if they've started that process, and to ask and suggest that we be a part of that process.
I appreciate that. I think it's about 9% of our budget right now, 5 million, right?
4.
Isn't it 5? No, it's 4?
It's 4.
Okay. Let's get it up.
Well, maybe we can pilot it out.
Okay, thank you, pal. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Okay, another Val presentation.
Yes.
6.02 is a discussion on the senior tax exemption. For the public's purpose, I think I could say. We did get a correspondence, and they had suggested that senior tax exemption, our policy here was a little bit outdated. So Val's been digging into that, and this is the results of the digging.
This could lead to action by the board, maybe not right this moment, but it could. So just be aware of that going into this. So this is more than just informational. This could lead to a decision.
The reference for the senior tax exemption is part of the New York State Property Law, Section 467. And basically that provides for a partial tax exemption for homeowners who are 65 and older, that their home is their primary residence, and they meet income requirements. The New York State maximum income level to receive a partial exemption is $50,000. Currently, Stacking Hill's policy for the senior exemption, the maximum income level to receive any exemption is basically $37,400. Some of the criteria is they have to have owned and resided in their home for at least 12 consecutive months prior to applying for this exemption. And it's an annual application that the homeowner would submit to the town assessor's office. This is Stacking Hill's current policy. It's a graduated scale saying if you make $29,000 or less, you're entitled to an exemption of 50% of your assessed value of your home. And that scale goes on to, if you make between $36,500 and $37,399, you are permitted a 5% exemption of your assessed value for tax purposes. How do we stack up with the rest of the county?
Yeah.
There are several counties who have a lower maximum, and there are several counties who have a higher maximum. And if you take note of the last column, the ones with the higher have recently adjusted that maximum limit. So in the last 2023 and 2024, you've got several districts who have now, increased their maximum income for the 50% exemption. Just to get a little bit of an idea, the population of Stack and Kill School District, according to the census data, was 8,996, and approximately 22% of that population is 65 years and older. And then knew the board would want to know the tax impact.
Oh, yeah,
of
I was,
this.
Dan
I was writing that.
Dan would want to know, the whole board would
I was just
Reading my
writing
mind.
that.
So at least for the current school year, there were 51 parcels in the district who received this exemption. That the exempted assessed value was 0.7% of total assessments of homeowner assessments. And it was a tax impact of little over $124,000. And based on our tax levy of $33 million, it's less than 1%. So as Dr. Fanueli alluded to, the board has a couple of options. You can leave things the way they are with the maximum limit of 37 through 99. You can consider increasing those maximum income limits. If you do that, you may do it as a lump sum or an incremental increase over 2 or 3 years. If you decide to increase the income limit, it would require a public hearing. And in order for it to take effect for this upcoming tax year, the board would have to agree to it and pass a resolution before March 1st. So if you go back to a couple of slides. For districts like Hyde Park and Rhinebeck, most of them were at the 29,000 where we were, and they just did a lump sum of $5,000 increase. For Wappingers, they are doing an incremental increase because ultimately they want to get to the state maximum of $50,000. So they did $5,000 increments over a couple of years.
So, we wouldn't compare ourselves to Wappingers and Arlington because they're a bigger district.
Correct.
Bigger area.
Yes.
Okay, so,
I mean, Rhinebeck is kind of comparable, Red Hook kind of is. Of all the people who have, all the districts who have, modified this income limit over the past couple of years. But again, as you can see on the chart, Dover hasn't looked at theirs since 2003, or changed it since 2003.
What would you like?
I would like some guidance from the board, if they want to consider an increase, and if they want to consider an increase, how much of an increase, so that I can present what that would look like in that graduated table
oh, yeah.
at the next meeting, and then subsequent to that, if that was something the board wanted to move forward with, then at the last meeting in February, we could have a public hearing, and the board could vote on a resolution, which I could get to the town, so it could take effect for this upcoming tax year.
So if we would approve it to be 42,000, how many seniors would qualify?
That is a number that I've asked the assessor. It changes every year because the seniors have to apply every year based on their income. So income will change every year. Assessments change every year, so that also impact the actual taxes that would be exempt. I can say for the last couple of years, the number of exemptions have been, on the chart, it was 51. For the 23-24 school year, there were 58 seniors who received the exemption. So it's not a huge number, but it seems to be somewhere in that 50 to 60 range, at least over the last few years.
For clarification, the $124,000, that's basically.
That's the taxes that was on the exempted assessment.
Right, and that's spread amongst the other
Yeah.
8,950
Yep.
owners, right?
All
Okay.
the taxpayers.
So that's about $13 to each homeowner now, in addition.
So if we approve, maximum income, we have to, approve a minimum.
Well, well, yes, what happens is, if I go back to this, that bottom number,
Yeah,
those intervals between those dollar amounts are set by law. So you would say, for example, you would really approve what you want the maximum number to be and what the minimum number to be.
okay.
So you would up that first number, so up to 25, up to 29,000. Because on this one.
Would they go the same, so if it looks like everyone
Each
else
one,
went up
right.
5,500,
Yes,
so it goes
yeah.
up 5,000.
It would go up,
Okay.
So
so
you're
each
looking
interval
at-
would go up 5,000.
Oh, okay,
Right.
okay.
And if you go back to the other one, it looks like a lot of people were at 29, not a lot, but look at Hyde Park and Rhinebeck.
And Hyde Park
Conic
just did
Hills.
theirs, yes.
It looks like they did the $5,000.
And they did it in one
Last year,
year.
the year before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they did it in 1 year. They just upped every interval by $5,000.
For me, I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, we have a very difficult challenge for seniors to stay in this area. And we want to try to keep the family unit together, and it's been very difficult. And, I mean, since 2006, the last time we looked at this policy, we've had a housing crisis, we've had a pandemic, we've had massive inflation. I mean, to me, the cost of a living has gone up tremendously. I'm sure that some of those incomes for, the seniors that are on set incomes have gone up and are now not eligible. But I really, I think that the impact to the rest of the younger versions of us here, I don't think it's gonna be that big, but it could be something that's helpful to some seniors in the area, so
I agree.
I'd like to see us, get competitive with the, like the Rhinebeck type of version there as well. My 2 cents.
Yeah, his 2 cents, not 2 cents.
I agree, I agree.
4 cents?
I certainly agree. I'm not sure you wouldn't probably be able to get data about how many of the eligible seniors actually apply for it.
Mm.
Does the assessor have that? It's pretty murky.
The assessor really just knows who applies.
Who applied, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I guess it would take a dive into the IRS records to find out.
Right.
So there's no way of predicting, if there might be more, percentage-wise more that might apply for it going forward. You're saying the number holds steady between 50 and 60,
At least
more or
for
less?
the past 2 or 3 years, I've been able to look and see exactly how many received the exemption, and it's been somewhere between that 50, 60 number.
Yeah, okay.
So are you asking us if we want to do it incrementally or all at once or something
Oh,
else?
Do you want
Or
to
how
do an
much?
increase?
Or how much?
And if you want to do it incrementally, like I said, most of the districts, when they did the 5,000, they did it all at once.
Do you have enough data to know that if we did it all at once, what the hit would be in the first year?
I would not, because
Yeah.
they would have to apply based on their income.
Right. It all depends
It
on
all
how you apply,
depends.
yeah.
I mean, this time next year, I can tell you what that number was.
Yeah, ask next year. But
So-
you don't feel it'll be, your guess is that it's not gonna get too far outside of that 50 to 60 range of people, or you just don't know?
Well, I would think it's going to be a little bit outside of that range because you're gonna now have more people who qualify. But I can't, with any certainty, tell you what that increase is gonna look like.
What would it be incrementally?
And the board could say that they wanted to increment in 2,000, 2,000, 1,000, you know, over a couple of years.
2,500,
Yeah.
2,500.
But I don't, you know, I don't know how much of that would, or how much of an impact that would have on our seniors
Right.
with just a $2,000 increase. Which
Is it
is
possible-
what the district-
Sorry. Is it possible to see with some of these other districts that went, just did a 23 and 24, that went up that 5,000 or whatever the number is, to see what they were from 2022 to this year, how much of a jump that was?
I could, it would probably only make sense for us to look at maybe like a Hyde Park or an Arlington, because we're only dealing with the town of Poughkeepsie. So most of those other districts have multiple towns, so their impact would be a lot larger.
Yeah.
We're fortunate that we have one town.
Right.
I think I've created enough work for you, I don't want to ask you to do anything else.
We could call Hyde Park, I mean, I think we could,
Yeah.
yeah, Arlington's a different animal probably.
Yeah, I mean, because, again, it depends on how,
If you give us a
Hyde Park's a
ballpark,
piece.
we could have something prepared for next week, and then the next board meeting, and then try to talk to Hyde Park, and see if they know how many increased.
And it was what the other districts did, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say at least 5,000.
yeah, 5,000.
At least. Not more. I mean, I could see Red Hook being, 36. You know, we're slightly larger district than Red Hook, correct?
It's pretty close, but
Yeah,
yeah.
5,000.
We could always.
So we have a 5, a 7?
I'd see up to 7 wouldn't trouble me.
Joanne, you have a
I'd be at 5.
5? Jeff, you have a,
I mean, I kind of agree with Richard, I wouldn't care if it was 7 or 5, to be honest. I don't think it's that big of an impact, but it may be a bigger impact to the seniors that
Yeah.
get 7 instead of 5.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Hurt us less than it would help them. Perhaps.
Seems like a lot of it, you said a lot of the other districts looks like they did 5. Any
Mhm.
reasoning behind why they did 5? Just a nice round number?
I think it was just a round number, and a lot of them didn't want to go all the way to the 50 like Arlington did.
Yeah.
And again, this is something that we can move the 5 now, and we, as a board, we
Reassess
could
it.
decide in a
Yeah.
couple of years
Good,
that you
yeah.
want to do another increase.
Five.
right?
Yeah.
5 is good.
5 it is.
5?
I will present what the graduated scale looks like at the next meeting, and if the board is agreeable, then we can move on to a public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Are you gonna try for Hyde Park, or no, I don't wanna have a false?
I'll call Linda and ask her.
Okay, and see what, okay, good.
There's some trends there, I mean, they must have all been around the same at some point, so.
Well, what
I'm
happened-
assuming it
Or
was,
just like the ones,
Yeah.
Millbrook, Paul, they're all 29.
and the
we are-
37.4,
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Yeah, I
it's,
mean, a lot of that happened because New York State raised the maximum income level to 50,000. So they started making adjustments upward there.
yeah, I'm definitely comfortable with that. Okay, that brings us to 6:03, a secondary administration update. Ken, you still awake?
Thanks, Ken.
All right.
Do you have a clicker, or are you gonna click for me?
I'll click for you.
Either or, but we'll,
I probably could, I can click through it if you want.
Okay.
All right, thanks for having me here. It's been a while since I've been able to do a presentation, so happy to be here. I'm going to feature two things that we've been doing at the high school. There's a lot going on at the high school. We're in the middle of Regents exams, but these were two events that you're going to see a little bit of my bias here, although I didn't do theater until I was a teacher. I was involved with it. I've just learned through years the impact that it has, really just in the arts. So just in general, I have always said that as educators, our number one charge is to make sure that students grow into adults that live fulfilling lives. And we do that in lots of different ways. I always said that I did it through my content, which was English. And, you know, that kind of encompasses the arts. So again, I'm a little biased, but music, theater, writing, singing, all of that is what makes us who we are. And I think maybe for me and for everybody here, at some point we probably all wanted to be a rock star on stage. I know I did. That didn't really pan out, but
What band, Ken?
I tried a lot of different things, but it just didn't work out. I couldn't sing, but we all kind of have that aspiration, I think, and it's really important for kids to be able to express themselves. And there's such a diverse group of students that have talents that oftentimes we don't even see. So it's really important for me to, in my career, to highlight this as much as I can. I left the classroom 8 years ago. I didn't know anything about Nice Tea until I was an administrator, and I didn't start chaperoning it until I was an administrator. Now I've become a sponsor, and I've gotten more involved with the organization in general, but it's New York State Theater Education Association. And every year they put on a conference. We've been able to go a couple of times since I've been at Spack and Kill. There's been some times, COVID prevented us, and then also last year the snowstorm prevented us. So this year we were able to go. We sent 10 students. So I'm just going to kind of go over some things that the students and I experienced. Mr. Romani went as a chaperone. It's an opportunity for educators and students to network together. So there's roughly 900 students that attend the conference, and with that there's educators chaperoning, and it is a working weekend for us too. It's very busy, but it's especially as you get to learn the faces, it's an opportunity for me and the other people there to catch up and to talk about what's going on, to share experiences when it comes to anything that goes with the arts. It's not just theater. Obviously that's the focus point, but theater encompasses all of the arts in it. So that's why it's theater education. The courses there, it is really rigorous. This is not just like a convention for students to see theater. This is a very rigorous, there's a lot of rigorous course offerings that the students are mainly there to attend. So they're taught by educators in schools, they're taught by professionals in the industry. There's also a college fair on the Saturday that we're there. And there's a red ribbon banquet on Saturday night that is through Broadway's Cares. So we all get together and raise money for fighting AIDS, which is what Broadway Cares Equity is all about. So what you see on the screen there is just our arrival there on Friday, the 10 students that we brought, Mr. Romani and myself, and then next to that picture, I thought it was cool to feature him. It's Andrew Barth Feldman. He's an actor known for Dear Evan Hansen, High School Musical, Saturday Night Live. There's a movie on Netflix with Jennifer Lawrence called No Hard Feelings. If you saw that, that was in the movie theaters last year. I want to highlight it not because of who he is. They did lose their minds. It was a surprise. Nobody knew that he was there. But his message was through theater. I thought it was really important. I think it's important for anybody that's watching this to hear it, that you're not always going to get the part that you want, but if you love what you do, you really need to put in 100% to the part that you get, oftentimes, because that will, you know, launch you into another part of life that you may not see. And he just kind of went into his whole experience in theater and what brought him to where he's at now. But a lot of the times where kids are auditioning, they don't get what they believe they should have, and you can act two different ways with that, and you can be negative about that or positive, and his whole message was to make sure that you are positive, and that you, if you love it, that you continue doing things and being a part of it. So I just thought that was something really important to mention. The coursework that I'm highlighting what our students attended, because again, this is an educational conference. It's exhausting, so I'll do this real quick. Hands-on sound for theater, practical guide to lighting, hands-on moving lights, theater design and tech for a college portfolio, art of the cue, which is intro to Q Lab, it's programming, one short day song and dance, harmonizing for stage, a new approach, period dance for actors, chorus numbers you'll never sing on stage, playing Shakespeare, LED lighting course, tech talk, musical theater performance technique, tap for beginners, musical theater dance for actors and singers, improv masterclass, ballet for beginners, heels jazz, chorus line choreography, advanced advanced swing dance, choreography intensive, rhythm tap, West Side Story choreography, basic swing dance, choreography intensive, and costume design of yourself. So there's fashion, there's singing, there's dancing, there's writing, there's college portfolio building. There's so much there. It's I can't express how rigorous it is. It is an exhausting weekend for the students and for the staff there, but it's a blast. The most important thing I found, and what drew me to this, is that I've never seen a situation where there's 1,000 kids that are in a resort. Essentially, they're supervised but unsupervised. There's a lot of responsibility on them to be where they're supposed to be, and nothing happens. Like, nothing but positivity, kids being their full selves and enjoying their time and meeting other people and networking. There's just, it's all positive, and it's a full weekend of that, and it's just an amazing thing to see. So on the left, one of our students, Quasi, was chosen to do the light and sound for the showcase Saturday night. So that's another piece to it. Kids that go there through their skills in classes get selected to be part of the performances that are practiced and auditioned through the weekend, and they're performances that are written by students that are there on the conference, and they're produced and directed by students and put on by students. So Quasi was a student that ran the lighting for the entire showcase Saturday night, which is pretty awesome. So those are just some more images. This was at the Red Ribbon Banquet, the Saturday night there. Again, we're all wearing red ribbons, and that's a AIDS Relief Foundation where everybody donates for that, and we raise money through the whole weekend for that. There's a lot going on there. So that was Nice Tea last weekend. I'm going to kind of jump into our mural that we've talked to. Community Connections, our our committee in the building, compiled of students and staff in the high school, have worked for a year and a half to create a mural that really came out of just discussions about, there's a lot of murals in the building that it's sad, but we don't have a lot of connection to. Most of us don't know where they came from. Sometimes we hear history about it, but the students aren't connected to it, and we felt like it was time to create something different and something new. So it began with a vision of doing something in the hall where some of the NASA imagery is, and then it kind of it changed, it shifted into, we wanted to make it more of a focal point of the school. And in our minds, it was a little bit about, like, we think about Nashville and those wings that everybody sees, people take pictures in front of in those murals. So we wanted to make something that was in a spot in the school that was a focal point for kids to be drawn to, for staff to be drawn to, and for events, for it to be in the background of events. We started with a survey to students about what they thought that mural should look like, and that was sent to the entire building. That was about a year and a half ago, and we compiled all that data as a committee, and we invited those students to attend the committee throughout. And that was a pretty fluid experience. Some students came one day, and a different group of students came another day. But what we got out of that was uniqueness, individualism, family, lifting each other up, representation were all important for what we wanted to do for this mural. Another important piece was the students talked about the idea of breaking through a ceiling because we still had work to do and we weren't finished, but we were making progress. So essentially we developed an image with student input throughout the school, as well as staff members in the Community Connections Committee. And in order to actually create the mural, we recruited our National Art Society, our National Junior Art Society, because somebody had to actually make it, and we don't have the skills to do that. So I'll reveal it at the end, but I would implore everybody to go see it in person if you haven't seen the finished product, because the pictures don't do it justice. But we decided to put it in the cafeteria, so it's in between the two doors. And we took that entire wall section. I can't express it was a year and a half making, and down to the colors, down to each piece of the mural was really well thought out, and every piece of it has some aspect of meaning, which I can go into in a second. But these are just some. I want to do justice and recognize who was responsible for creating the image. But again, the picture that we actually created on Photoshop was done with lots of hands, lots of students that didn't have the artistic ability to put it on the wall, but we had a collective group of people. So these are just, I'll just kind of scroll through. So each flower represents something, and they were all hand-drawn and hand-painted by one individual student. So you'll see at the end, but each student was responsible for one flower. The colors were all picked by other students who had involvement outside of this. And I'll go through some of the artists. Some of them have graduated last year. Tabitha Corin, Giselle Chacon, Gabriella Murphy, Isabella Salmon, Tamar Hyman Fessler, and Tricia Penuli. Julia De Laurentiis, and that is the finished product.
So beautiful.
Yeah. So what I'll read, if you notice on the top right, right above the door, not above it, right to the left of the door, there's a plaque. That plaque says, "Each flower and butterfly in this bouquet is unique, fragile, and beautiful in its own way. Just like every one of us, the stems of the flowers grow from the same place, symbolizing our shared experiences we've had at Spackey Hill. Remember our humble beginnings and always nurture the beauty within each other." The butterfly on the right, flying out of the picture, depicts us moving forward and continuing our journey. And that is the finished product. We are there's more to this plan, but for that particular spot, that is the product. And the idea is, and we've had it, kids will stand in front of it, kind of pose in front of it, hold it, and it's been kind of a focal point for, although, we've had a lot of conversations with Anxious Generation and social media, it is a focal point for some pictures and things like that. It brings kids together. So that's what we wanted. That was what the vision was, to have people united in front of it and bring people together. Each color in the flower is different. Each flower is different from different parts of the world. I mean, there's a lot that we could go into about it. but for the sake of time, I just wanted to reveal it and express to everybody, please go see it in person, because the detail is just not, you can't see it on this image, so, thank you. Does anyone have any questions about NICE-T or Regents exams or the mural?
I like the plaque on the mural so that future
Yeah.
generations can understand what it is. And you say it kind of lost context on some of the other ones, so it's nice to have up there.
Yeah, it was important for us to make sure we showcased parts of it. I mean, like I said, I wish we tried to capture the process, but I don't think we captured all the conversations and the dialogue we had about why each flower was picked, each butterfly, and we could have done better in that sense of being extra critical of myself, but it was important to us to showcase the meaning behind it and not just have it there.
Yeah, beautifully worded.
Very nice.
Awesome.
Yellow submarine still in the cafeteria?
It is, and we have plans to expand on that, not to change it. We've had conversations about not painting over murals because now we've experienced it, and 30 years from now, if somebody painted over it, there's a lot of people that had involvement with this, and we know that that's the case for these other murals. So we're trying to figure out ways to bring life into them and have more students currently in it involved with that. So that's part of the next process there.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. As always, it's glad to be here, and thank you for having us. I thought tonight I would discuss the contents of a letter I recently sent to Guardians regarding the Dignity Act and Title IX. We go over these things with students throughout the year, but I had never shared what we go over specifically with Guardians, and I thought it would be important to, because I think a lot of times Guardians might not be aware of kind of some of the things that we go over, and to just kind of give them the actual slides that we use. I thought that would be helpful, because sometimes when we have conversations with Guardians, we can kind of tell that they aren't always aware of the extent of what their students are exposed to mostly through their cell phones and through social media. So I thought it would be good to share that. So the letter talked about what we go over when we talk about the Dignity Act and DASA, and what we go over when we talk about Title IX and sexual harassment. And so I shared that information with them in the slides. I also shared, the signs that actually they're here in the library and they're all around, which are related to the Dignity Act, which are all the various things we don't joke about. We don't joke about gender. Can't read that one over there, but it's important for them to understand kind of what the world that their children are living in terms of social media and cell phone, because a lot of the information that most of the time when we run into issues on the middle school level regarding any of these, it usually is a lot of it has connections to social media and to cell phones. So in my letter, I also made reference to that. That we have our cell phone policy. We have a cell phone policy here, but obviously, cell phones are not something that students don't have access to outside of school. Most of them have them here as well. They keep them away, but they have them physically on them. And I also made reference to the book *The Anxious Generation*, which, if I don't know if everybody's read it or been exposed to it, but it's a pretty it's got a lot of data in there that creates a convincing argument about how harmful these devices are and how harmful social media is to especially middle-aged school students. As a principal here for the last 10 years, I can attest to that. I have watched it continue to grow. I have watched it continue to get younger. So if Mr. DeSouza was here, he could probably tell you what I was telling you 8 years ago. I don't know if 8 years from now, Mr. Lynch will be telling you about it, because I don't know how it seems to get younger and younger. And the younger it is, the more harmful it is to students. So the Anxious Generation talks, the author, as well as now our governor, is suggesting that schools be banned, not schools be banned from cell phones, sorry, it is almost 10 o'clock, but cell phones be banned from schools. And I'm a little biased as the principal of a middle school, but if that ban happened, I would support it. He also suggests that students not be exposed to have a cell phone at all until age 14, and to not be exposed to social media till age 16. And again, I would support those measures. And also, kind of the fourth major thing he talks about is having more time for free play, having more kind of, unstructured, independent time where students can kind of, learn responsibility. And, we have that at Todd, we have, the lunchtime and the recess time is where we get to see that. And you see it, and just so everybody isn't worried, kids are still kids. Nothing's changed. It's not like it's not like they're taken over by AI, even though they are very connected to it. They're very connected to AI, because the cell phone is just a little AI machine that gives you anything you want, do anything you want. That being said, your children are fine, and they socialize. They may have socialized, great. But there are issues that come up, and it's not a thing of, oh, it's just a certain type of student or anything like that. It's everywhere. So even as students who are well adjusted, and they've got everything they need at home, the exposure to these social media sites and then all kinds of other stuff. When you're that young and you have access to the entire world in your pocket, it's a lot. So that's why I wanted to send the letter out to kind of give that information to parents and to guardians, and to let them know that we continue to work with the kids on basically on a daily basis, because the Positivity Project basically is everything that we do. This week we're doing social intelligence. So everything about the Positivity Project is always, can always be related to these kinds of things. But the cell phone is a major part of a child's life. It's a major part of a child's life. So it's important to try to address those things as best we can, because while I think it's a great device in many, many ways, it's got a side that isn't so great, and for younger people, it creates a lot of harm. And we see that from time to time here. So, sounds very much of a downer after following this rules. But it was important, and I thought it was important to put out there, and it was important to share with you, and so you're aware of it. And that's something that I'm going to be doing annually, and try to do it a couple of times a year, because I think it's really important. My letter said, look at the slides, have conversations with your children about the slides. It's really, and maybe over time I'll send some more things from time to time about maybe even some conversations to have, because I remember being a parent of middle school students, and guardians are always many years behind their kids when it comes to this stuff. They have no idea. Kids they're flying, and so trying to say, hey, you might want to. And then when they get the call from me from time to time, and they're like, "Why are you looking?" And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you need to be keeping an eye on this stuff." So, like I said, I thought it was important to put out there to the parents and guardians. I thought it was important to bring it to the board. to let them know that I went over this stuff with them, and I hope that over time we as a, I think we as a middle school are doing a really good job. I think we work really hard. I think we give out a lot of information. I don't know what every other middle school in New York State or the county does, but I feel pretty confident that we are trying to be proactive and trying to, address issues, and and hopefully over time, society, the world outside Todd Middle School will get on the same page and take a look at what's happening and how it's affecting young people. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, very timely work with the Anxious Generation, like we've been doing, with, Governor Hochul addressed today, talking still more about, we have to have a package, but also, saying it's for schools on the policy in place next year, regarding, phones not being used during school day, so, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Part of a different conversation might be how much screen time we have during the school day on Chromebooks and everything else too.
So you look at,
I'd like to learn a little bit more about that, because I mean, we've delved into the Anxious Generation over the retreat and everything, and I think we learn a lot from it. I certainly don't understand a lot of the things my kids do, and it has to do with the phone, a lot of it, I could say. So.
I agree.
Okay, item 7.01 is board correspondence. I believe we had one piece of correspondence that we've addressed on a few different occasions. 7.02 is comments from the public on non-agenda items. Do we have public comment on non-agenda items? I'll just mention, just for the sake of it, generally the rule is about 3 minutes, and then what we would do is, we may or may not respond to you directly. We may ask somebody to respond to it at a later time, and then we'll just disclose that information later. But just
okay. Very good. Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the late time, but I wanted to take a minute. I am Melissa Thompson. I'm here tonight representing the support staff of Spackenkill School District. Our group makes up 2 contracts, right? Our teaching assistants, clerical staff, and monitors on one. Our custodial workers, bus drivers, maintenance workers, groundskeepers, and very soon our IT staff on the other contract. Very soon, you as the Board of Education will be making decisions regarding our futures. And I just want to I thought it was important that you see us, right? There's a number of members of our support staff here tonight. And, I myself at one time, for 9 years, was a board member in the district where I live. So I realize the commitment that you all make. And one of the concerns I had as a board member was many times we were forced to make decisions, but we didn't know who the players were. We didn't know who or the jobs that they did, right? But we were required to make those decisions. So I want to tell you about me. I am the secretary of the counseling office at the high school, right? We have 3 guidance counselors, a social worker, and a school psychologist, and I provide support to each of them. If you ask your children, do you know Mrs. Thompson? He or she will say, she's that lady that stands in front of her office and tells all of us good morning in the morning. Sometimes I embarrass them, because if I say good morning and they don't have the AirPods, right? If the AirPods are in, you're not going to get a good morning. But if they don't, and they don't reply to me, the next day I use their name. Because very often in the guidance office, I see their pictures, I know who they are. So it's important, right, that I have that interaction with them. And I've had students graduate that come back to say, Mrs. Thompson, that good morning was what I needed. That got me through my day, or it got things better for my week. So that's me in a nutshell. I do want to, very quickly, Mr. Kohler made a very precise comment just a few minutes ago about the cost of living. So I sit with this little Post-it on my desk every day. The last time our group came before you was in 2021. And the unit then accepted on the contract that I am a part of, 1.25% of an increase, okay? I'm on step, so it was a little fair, just slightly better. But over 4 years, I average about 61 cents an hour difference from 4 years ago. But the cost of living in 2021 was 5.9. And then we get to where Mr. Kohler's talking about. 2022 was 8.7. 2023 was 8.7. 2024 came down a little bit at 3.2. And we're looking at 2.5 for 2025. Right? So the members of the support staff have looked at an increase of 1.25 over these years where the costs have gone this way. Right? So we will be looking to hopefully repair some of the damage that we've seen. Many of our members live in district. I obviously do not, but many do. The majority do. And they're very proud to work here at Spackenville. They love their community. And I have to say, I love this community. You know, talking about athletics, I think we've all seen me at baseball up in Binghamton, or football out at Sullivan West, or, you know, the basketball team's a little different story because my nephew plays. But I support these kids, as does every member of the support staff. And when our contracts come before you, I ask that you support us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? .03 is comments from the board. Joanne, you either want to go home or you're cold?
Both.
Do you have any comments? No? Okay. Richard?
No.
Sasha?
I just want to let her know that we see you and we're working on it.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Mine will be as quick as I can, but I want to thank everybody, including the people that waited this long, and thank you for coming and thank you for saying what you did. But thank you to my board members and to the administration. I really liked the dialogue that we had. I think that's democracy at its best right there. I'm in full support of how you know, our votes went tonight. I appreciate it, and I wish that we did stuff like this more often. Not quite as long as it went tonight, but I really appreciate that everybody said what they wanted to on it, and a decision was made, and I support it wholly. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I missed the support staff luncheon this year, but often we go to support staff luncheons, and I've always said when I've had an opportunity there that the support staff is just this amazing backbone that helps this district function. So we do greatly appreciate everything you do. And we'll all take that into consideration, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you. 7:04, comments from the superintendent.
Kind of climactic, right? It's just I'll echo what Jeff said. Tonight was different for us, but educational, and I appreciate the effort of everyone. You know, definitely the board, but also everyone kind of behind the scenes who kind of put together all that information. Just wanted as much information out there as possible. I think we got it. Just appreciate the dialogue. Already said this. I was going to mention that Governor Hochul did have address today, and the cell phone piece that came up. So I think I definitely appreciate the principal's work and Dan's work for tying in the book we're working on. And I know Ken's doing the same things. He had a couple book talks with the Anxious Generation and Hidden Focus, Soul and Focus. So we've done the work. So now once we unpack what the governor says, as we continue on in the year, I think we'll be set for next year. So I want to thank everyone for that. And Ken, you were the best dressed painter. I don't know if anyone noticed that in that picture. You were dressed as if you are here tonight.
Oh, yeah, too bad.
Being that you brought it up, I just want to mention, the cover on the spackle was closed, and there was still a sticker on the spackle knife, so I'm just not
questioning,
sure
yeah.
you were really spackling there.
I am judgmental of what I did. Even to this day, I'll walk in and I'll get, it could have been a little smoother there. You could kind of see my little spackling job, but I did not get trained in that. So I tried my best.
That was great, thank you. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 5-0. We'll see you February 11th, I believe.